Chapter 22-26. Ji Tianxing hurriedly told Ji Ku the truth of the matter so that she wouldn't misunderstand. He had personally experienced the terror of an Yu and those black-armored guards. He didn't want Ji Ku to put herself in danger and come into contact with those terrifying foreign race experts. The transmission jade slip was quickly sent out. This time, Ji Tianxing didn't have to wait for long. About half an hour later, the transmission jade slip flew back and landed in front of him. He hurriedly reached out and caught the jade slip, probing it with his divine sense to read Ji Ku's message. He heard Ji Ku's voice filled with surprise and doubt as she asked, "Big Brother Tianxing, so those mysterious experts aren't from this world? No wonder they looked so strange. I've never seen them before. No wonder they couldn't communicate with the devil race and were so powerful. Then wouldn't they be invading the North Underworld Mountain after killing so many people? If that's the case, with their strength and methods, it's very likely that they could exterminate the devil race and the ancestral fiend god. This is good news for us." At this point, Ji Ku paused for a moment, her excitement and anticipation fading. She asked with some doubt, "That's right, Big Brother Tianxing, in my memory, you once told me a story about the void. You said that the void is vast and boundless. Even divine Tao emperors can't see the edge of the void. There are billions of stars in the void, and each star is a small world. When many stars gather together, they form many star fields and galaxies. However, 99% of the stars are dead stars. There's no light, air, or 5 elements spirit chi. It's impossible to give birth to life. Only a very small number of special stars can give birth to life, giving birth to various civilizations and martial arts inheritances. That's why there are 3,000 great worlds and 3 great worlds. The 5 elements world we live in is one of the 3,000 great worlds. If one can surpass the martial god realm, they can ascend to one of the 3 great worlds. Big Brother Tianxing, those mysterious experts in black armor, which world do they come from? Are they from the 3,000 great worlds? Or the 3 great worlds?" Ji Tianxing held the transmission jade slip with both hands and silently listened to Ji Ku's words. His expression and gaze became complicated. Ji Ku evoked his memories, and a scene appeared in his mind. It was more than 1,000 years ago when he had just become a divine king. At that time, he took Ming Yu and strolled through the starry sky to admire the beautiful scenery of the Phoenix star field. Ming Yu was a divine Tao emperor. She had never seen the universe's starry sky. That's why he told her about the voids' story. She laughed laughs, USSSSSSS. It was also on that night that he used his great divine ability to pluck 18 Big Dipper stars, refine them into a string of beads, and gave it to Ming Yu. Memories. Ji Tianxing clenched the communication jade slip in his hand and murmured in a somewhat low mood, "Ku still remembers those words from back then. I suppose her memories have all been restored. She doesn't hate me, she's still pestering me. She even risked her life to stay in the North Underworld Mountain to gather information." Thinking of this, he made up his mind. He used his divine sense to send a message to the transmission jade slip. "Cuckoo, the world's vastness and the voids are far beyond our imagination. Even I haven't seen it all, let alone understand it all. The mysterious experts who invaded the North Underworld Mountain shouldn't be from the 3 great worlds. They're neither from the dragon realm, nor the god realm, nor the underworld. I don't know which great world they're from. But you don't need to investigate this question. Let the devil race deal with them. I have a premonition that the North Underworld Mountain will be in chaos. It's not good for you. You have to come back as soon as possible. Only then can I be at ease." After Ji Tianxing said this in a serious tone, he sent out the transmission jade slip. Whoosh! The transmission jade slip turned into a purple light and flew away. Ji Tianxing closed his eyes silently and waited for Ji Ku's reply. This time, the wait was exceptionally long. After an entire hour, late at night, Ji Ku finally sent back a message. "Big Brother Tianxing, I know you're worried about me. But this time, please forgive my stubbornness. The five elements world was originally sealed by the gods. For thousands of years, it hasn't been invaded by races from other worlds. But this time, mysterious experts from other races have come. Maybe this is an opportunity for us. Of course, it could also be a disaster. But no matter what, I can't leave at this time. It wasn't easy for me to sneak into the North Underworld Palace, win Ling Xian's trust, and become one of his confidants. If I leave now, I won't be able to sneak in and gather information in the future. Big Brother Tianqing, don't worry. I'll protect myself. Ji Ke's message ended here. Ji Tianqing was very clear about her nature. Since she had said those words, she must have thought it through carefully before making the decision. Moreover, she wouldn't change her mind easily. From this point of view, Ji Ke's personality was the same as his. Once they decided on something or someone, they wouldn't change their mind. Ji Tianqing gripped the jade slip tightly and closed his eyes with a solemn expression. After a long silence, he murmured to himself, "Cuckoo, take care." At this time, Burial of Heaven's voice sounded in his mind, persuading him, "Actually, I can understand Mingyue's thoughts. I also agree with her decision." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked, "Why?" Burial of Heaven said in a low voice, "And you and those other race guards came here for a strange reason. It seems to have something to do with the destroyed phantom world. But you also know that they must have come from some great world in the depths of the starry sky. Don't you want to know which world they came from? Why did they cross the void and come to the five elements world? What is their goal? What happened to those worlds in the depths of the void? For nearly 1,000 years, the god seal of the five elements world has gradually weakened, and many cracks and holes have appeared on the golden barrier. Does this mean that the seal of the five elements world will be lifted soon? Once the seal is lifted, even martial gods will have a chance to ascend to the god realm. Also, you found the phantom star core and the remains of the divine worship. Does this mean that a war has broken out between the great worlds or the gods? Burial of Heaven said so much in one breath and asked so many questions. It paused for a moment and continued, "Since we've encountered these things, we should figure it out as soon as possible. Perhaps in the 1,000 years since your death, the outside world has also changed. We won't stay in the five elements world forever. Sooner or later, we will kill our way back to the god realm and take back your glory and status. If we can figure out the situation in advance, wouldn't it be better for us?" Chapter 22-27. Even if the Burial of Heaven did not remind him, Ji Tianqing would have guessed. When he first entered the void, he found the ethereal star core and the remains of the divine ship. At that time, he guessed that the major worlds in the depths of the universe were not peaceful. Moreover, he would not stay in the five elements world forever. He would eventually return to the divine world. The appearance of an Yu and the foreign race experts was definitely a bad sign. Of course, he had thought of investigating an Yu and the others' intentions and origins. However, that would have to wait until he was strong enough to put it into action. He was worried about Ji Ke's safety, which was why he objected to Ji Ke staying in the North Underworld Mountain. He did not want Ji Ke to get close to the foreign race expert. However, Ji Ke had his own thoughts and persistence. He had made up his mind. At this point, there was nothing he could do. He could only pray that Ji Ke would be safe and successful. After a moment of silence, he took out a large number of spiritual stones and elixirs from his interspatial ring and began to cultivate in seclusion. The changes made him feel that the situation was getting more and more tense. There might be chaos in the future. He was more eager to improve his strength. He only wanted to break through to the divine realm as soon as possible. Only then could he shake the world and solve all problems. Within the divine nation of Tianju, there was a vast alternate space hidden under the heavenly wind and fire layer. This space had a radius of millions of miles. It was filled with boundless heaven and earth spiritual qi and invisible divine power. This was the abode of martial god Tianju, the divine nation where he lived and cultivated. The divine kingdom was prosperous and flourishing, and all that could be seen was gorgeous scenery. There were endless mountains and forests in the surroundings. There was a vast plain in the middle. On the pleasant plain, there were 9 ancient and majestic cities. They protected the magnificent divine city in the middle. The divine city was magnificent and majestic. There were rows upon rows of palaces and buildings. Even the streets and plazas were paved with golden brick. It was extremely luxurious. At this time, outside a secret chamber in the depths of the divine palace, a middle-aged man in a purple robe with a head full of white hair was standing respectfully outside the stone door, quietly waiting. This person was tall and had a handsome but pale face. There was a small purple sword mark on his forehead that was faintly flickering with lightning. Without a doubt, he was the commander of the Immortal Guards, the right-hand man of martial god Tianju, the famous martial saint Yi Lu Shui. Although his status was the same as Qin Zheng's, they were both commanders of the Immortal Guards. However, his strength and methods were superior to Qin Zheng's. He was deeply trusted and valued by martial god Tianju. Yi Lu Shui stood in the dark passage with his head slightly lowered, waiting quietly. The secret room in front of him was the most heavily guarded place in the divine kingdom. It was where martial god Tianju cultivated in seclusion. After about 100 breaths of time, the wide and tall black stone door lit up with a dense white light. Shwa! The white light formed a mirror that was half the height of a person, revealing a noble and dignified figure in a golden robe. This figure only had the upper half of his body. He wore a golden robe and a crown on his head. His face was dignified without being angry. It was martial god Tianju. Yi Lu Shui hurriedly knelt on one knee and respectfully saluted, saying, "Subordinate Yi Lu Shui greets Divine Lord. Divine Lord, may I know what orders you have for me?" In the white light mirror, martial god Tianju looked down at Yi Lu Shui with a dignified face and said in a low voice, "2 years ago, you were ordered to kill Ji Tianqing, snatch the sword of the burial of heaven, and find the mystery of ascension. But you've tried a few times, and all of them ended in failure. Now that 2 years have passed, Ji Tianqing has grown to a terrifying level. It has been proven that he is the reincarnation of Kenshin. The sword of the burial of heaven is in his hands." Yi Lu Shui knelt on the ground and did not get up. He lowered his head and said in a low voice, "It is my fault. Divine Lord, please punish me." Martial god Tianju said in a dignified tone, "What's the use of punishing me now? I will give you another chance to make up for your mistakes. No matter what, no matter the cost, you must get rid of Ji Tianqing. If you can find the mystery of ascension, that would be the best. Even if you can't get it, you must get rid of him. He must not be allowed to continue growing." Yi Lu Shui quickly cupped his fists and bowed. He said in a sonorous tone, "I understand. I will find a way to get rid of him. Even if I have to sacrifice myself, I will not hesitate. However, Ji Tianqing is already very powerful. He is on par with Wu Duantian. I am afraid that I am not strong enough to get rid of him and delay your plan." Yi Lu Shui already knew about the battle between Ji Tianqing and Wu Duantian and the killing of Qin Zheng and the Sky City governor. Therefore, he was not confident that he could get rid of Ji Tianqing. Martial god Tianju naturally thought of this as well. He extended his hand and shot out a white light expressionlessly. Swoosh! The dense white light wrapped around a strange-looking sword. It flew out of the stone door and landed in front of Yi Lu Shui. After the white light dissipated, it could be seen that it was not a sword but a 5-foot-long ruler. The ancient-looking ruler was as wide as a palm. It was dark purple in color and its surface was engraved with divine runes and symbols. It shone with a faint purple light. Yi Lu Shui stared at the purple ruler and was shocked. He asked in disbelief, "Taiyin soul-severing ruler? God Master, what are you?" Martial god Tianju said expressionlessly, I am still in seclusion. I am at the critical juncture of breaking through the bottleneck. I am afraid I will not be able to come out for a few years. If that wasn't the case, I would have killed Ji Tianqing myself. This great soul-severing ruler, this God will grant you temporary use, to give you a hand. With your strength and methods, plus this divine ruler, you shouldn't have failed, right? Yilu Shui found it hard to believe. His heart was filled with shock and joy. He quickly cupped his fists and bowed. He said in a firm tone, God Master, please rest assured. With this weapon, I will definitely be able to kill Ji Tianqing. I will not let you down. After saying that, he could not wait to reach out and hold the tiny soul-severing ruler. He looked at it excitedly. The seemingly thin tiny soul-severing ruler was as heavy as a mountain. When he held it, he could feel the vicissitudes of life. It also contained a mysterious power that could affect and restrain a martial artist's divine soul. Yilu Shui carefully put away the ruler and was about to leave to carry out his mission. At this moment, martial god Tianju said, Wait! Yilu Shui, what has Yuan Zhen been doing recently? When Yuan Zhen was mentioned, Yilu Shui could not help but stiffen. After hesitating for a while, he answered truthfully, God Master, the incident at the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly has dealt a heavy blow to the First Prince. Rumors about the First Highness had already spread throughout the entire continent and were known by many martial Dao forces. I have given strict orders to stop the rumors from spreading in the martial arts world. However, the results are minimal and difficult to stop. For nearly a month, the First Prince has been hiding in his palace and has not stepped out. Chapter 22-28. Hearing Yilu Shui's words, martial god Tianju frowned and his face turned ugly. Bastard! As my eldest son, how can he be so weak and unable to withstand the storm? Not to mention rumors. Even if I am condemned by thousands of people and have a bad reputation for 1,000 years, don't even think about breaking my heart and will. Such depravity will only make others laugh and disappoint the imperial clan's ministers. Martial god Tianju shouted angrily and his eyes were filled with disappointment. Yilu Shui hurriedly cupped his fists and comforted, Sir God Master, please calm down. His First Highness is your most valued eldest son. He was born honorable and talented. Since he was young, His First Highness grew up in endless glory. With the title of Divine Nation's #1 genius, he has never suffered any setback. Now that he has encountered such a thing and suffered such a heavy blow, it is reasonable for him to be depressed. However, I believe that with His First Highness' wisdom and perseverance, he will be able to pull himself together soon. Martial god Tianju nodded and said in a heavy tone, I have always thought highly of Yuan Zhen. Even when he sacrificed his fourth son, Yuan Chong, I have never punished him. Now it seems that he is still too young and lacking. Yilu Shui, visit Yuan Zhen on behalf of me. It doesn't matter if you comfort him or provoke him, as long as he can pull himself together. How can he drown his sorrows in alcohol every day? If he was still my son, he would have remembered this humiliation and hatred and worked even harder to become stronger. If he can't even overcome this hurdle, how can I give divine nation to him in the future? Yilu Shui hurriedly nodded and replied, I understand. Don't worry, Sir God Master, I will definitely pull His First Highness together and let him cultivate in seclusion. Martial god Tianju slightly nodded and waved his hand. All right, you may leave. When he could kill Ji Tianqing, he would come back and report back. Otherwise, don't come to see me. Yilu Shui revealed a confident smile and said firmly, with the help of the ruler, I will definitely succeed. Just wait for my good news. Then, he bowed to martial god Tianju and left. The white mirror on the stone door quickly dissipated, and everything returned to normal. Unknowingly, half a month passed. In these 10 days, Ji Tianqing had been cultivating in seclusion in the secret room. He was comprehending the secret techniques and increasing his power quickly. The pillar of heaven's mountains had always been peaceful. The disciples were diligently cultivating, and the 9 sects and 18 factions were also recruiting talents. The Huanglong Taoist had been busy. Not only did he have to deal with the surrender of the 72 cities, but he also had to manage the sects and cities under his rule. Everything was progressing in a good direction. The pillar of heaven's mountains' influence and foundation were getting stronger and stronger, and their reputation was getting more and more resounding. Late at night, the moon was dark and the wind was strong. The pillar of heaven's mountains was completely silent. Only a few palaces and mansions were still lit. 95% of the disciples were either sleeping or cultivating. It was very quiet on the mountain peak. Only a few groups of patrolling guards were walking in the dark. At this moment, a black shadow silently floated by halfway up the mountain. Shwa! The black shadow landed on a protruding millstone on the cliff. Under the cover of the night, the black shadow curled up in the corner of the boulder. His eyes were bright as he looked at the night sky, secretly searching for something. From the figure, this man in black was wearing a black suit and a mask. He was a muscular young man. He squatted on the millstone and observed the surroundings. When he found that there was no one around, he stretched out his hand and shot out a pale blue light. Shwa! The pale blue light flickered 3 times in a row and was quickly extinguished. This seemed to be some kind of special signal. Not long after, a black shadow sped over from the pitch-black night below the cliff. Shwa! In the blink of an eye, the tall black shadow landed on the millstone and stood still. This person was also wearing a black suit and a black iron mask on his face. However, one could vaguely see that this person was tall. His sideburns and eyebrows were snow-white, and his eyes were bright and sharp. He exuded a dignified and powerful aura. The black-clothed young man glanced at him and quickly bowed. He used a voice transmission technique and said, "Greetings, Lord Yi." The black-clothed man called Lord Yi nodded slightly and said, 2 years ago, I arranged for you to sneak into the Pillar of Heaven's mountains as a spy in case of an emergency. Now that 2 years have passed, how is your mission going?" The black-clothed young man bowed respectfully and reported, "My lord, I didn't disappoint you and successfully entered the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I have become a disciple that is heavily nurtured. Now I have won the trust of a few deacons and elders." Lord Yi nodded again and said with relief, "That's good. My efforts in nurturing you back then were not in vain. 2 years of seclusion, only to be used tonight. Don't worry, after tonight, you can leave the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I will not treat you unfairly." The black-clothed young man's eyes lit up and said with anticipation, "Thank you for your nurturing, Lord Yi. I just want to return to my hometown and accompany my parents after completing the mission." Without waiting for him to finish, Lord Yi waved his hand and said, "These are all small matters. As long as the mission tonight is successful, I will definitely let your family reunite." The black-clothed young man was moved to tears and quickly bowed to express his gratitude. "Thank you for your help, Lord. I am willing to be loyal to you for the rest of my life. My lord, please follow me." After saying that, the black-clothed young man bowed and made a pleased gesture. He brought Lord Yi away from the millstone and flew towards the peak of the mountain. Their movements were neither fast nor slow. They did not reveal any aura, nor did they reveal any energy fluctuations. The black-clothed young man was very familiar with the defense of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. He brought Lord Yi to the peak of the mountain and bypassed the patrols and sentries with ease before entering the holy city. There were many houses and palaces in the holy city, and thousands of disciples lived there. About 15 minutes later, the black-clothed young man led Lord Yi to a house without anyone noticing. The two of them hid in the woods outside the house. The black-clothed young man said to Lord Yi through voice transmission, "Lord Yi, this is one of the 4 courtyards of the inner sect. There are 26 inner sect disciples and more than 100 servants and odd job workers living here. The most elite core disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains all have their own residences. It is not convenient for us to take action. Only the disciples of the 4 courtyards of the inner sect are suitable for us to take action. These people are all young talents who are favored by the elders of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. They have good potential. Once these disciples go missing, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains will definitely try to find them. They will definitely not sit by and do nothing. Lord Yi nodded with satisfaction and said, That is good. Not only is it convenient for us to take action, but it will also cause the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to feel the pinch and have no choice but to investigate and search. You have done well. Stay here and support me. I will be able to complete the plan in at most 15 minutes. Chapter 22-29. The black-clothed youth stood guard outside the house, helping Lord Yi keep a lookout. He had calculated the time. The next time the patrolling guards passed by here, it would be at least half an hour later. He believed that Lord Yi would definitely be able to complete the mission within this half an hour. Sure enough, after a short 15 minutes, Lord Yi left and returned. On the surface, Lord Yi did not seem to have changed. In fact, in this 15 minutes, there was no sound coming from the house. Even the lights in the house were not extinguished. As long as one did not enter the house to check, one would not be able to see anything strange. However, in Lord Ye's right hand, there was an additional palm-sized black pouch. At first glance, that pouch looked like an ordinary perfume pouch. However, there were no flower patterns embroidered on it, making it look rather mysterious. In fact, there was a rather large space in the pouch, and there were more than 20 young martial artists lying in a disorderly manner. These young martial artists were all wearing standard white robes with the same emblem and pattern embroidered on their chests. Everyone was unconscious or in a deep sleep, completely unaware of what was happening in the outside world. The black-clothed youth glanced at the pouch and immediately revealed a look of admiration. He transmitted his voice to Lord Yi. Lord Yi, have you succeeded? Lord Yi nodded slightly and sneered in a mocking tone. I personally took action to deal with these small fries. How could I fail? Don't waste time, quickly bring me away. The black-clothed youth did not waste any more words and hurriedly brought Lord Yi through the night sky, rushing down the mountain. On the evening of the second day, the sun was about to set. Ji Tianxing was cultivating in the secret chamber. His entire body flickered with a faint golden light, emitting a majestic magic power fluctuation. Suddenly, Huanglong Daoist's voice sounded from outside the secret chamber. His tone was somewhat anxious. Master, something happened, quickly come and take a look. The sudden shout startled Ji Tianxing, who was cultivating. He slowly ended his cultivation, exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and opened his eyes. He frowned slightly and looked calmly at the entrance of the secret room. Through the stone door, he asked, Huanglong, why are you so panicked that you have to knock on my door and wake me up? Huanglong Daoist did not dare to hide anything and hurriedly reported, Master, last night, 26 inner sanctum disciples went missing. There has been no news of them since. What? Ji Tianxing's face suddenly changed, his eyebrows furrowed, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He waved his hand and released a dazzling light, opening the stone door of the secret room. Huanglong Daoist hurriedly entered the secret chamber and bowed respectfully. Ji Tianxing looked at him with burning eyes and said in a dignified tone, What's going on? Tell me everything from beginning to end. Huanglong Daoist organized his thoughts and explained, Master, the missing 26 inner disciples are all from the western inner courtyard. They have great talent and potential. Last night, when the lamps were lit, the 26 disciples were still in the western courtyard. They were either resting or cultivating. There was nothing unusual. The servants in the western courtyard can attest to this. However, when it was time to practice swordsmanship this morning, the disciples of the western courtyard did not appear. Deacon Wu went to the western courtyard to look for them, only to find that the 26 inner disciples were all missing. Only the servants were left. After the incident, Deacon Wu hurriedly reported to the elders. A few elders personally led the guards to search the Pillar of Heaven's mountains several times, but they still couldn't find those disciples. The elders then reported this to me and asked me to think of a way to find them. However, I spent 6 hours and searched 20,000 miles around the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, but I did not find any clues. I really have no idea what to do, so I can only come to you for help. After Huanglong Daoist finished speaking, Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a while. He asked in a low voice, "Have you investigated the western courtyard? Are there any traces of fighting in the disciples' residences? Also, have you interrogated the servants and odd job workers? Why would the 26 inner disciples disappear for no reason? Don't tell me there's no movement at all?" Huanglong Daoist shook his head and said with a grave expression, "Master, I have personally investigated the situation in the western courtyard. There are no traces of fighting in the disciples' residences. Even those 100 over servants, I have personally interrogated them, but they are completely clueless. Those 20 over disciples seem to have evaporated into thin air, without leaving any trace. I have no other choice, so I had to disturb your closed-door cultivation. Please make a decision." Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a grave expression, "It's impossible for the 26 living disciples to disappear into thin air. This must be some conspiracy, deliberately targeting our Pillar of Heaven's mountains. As long as it's done by humans, there will definitely be traces and clues left behind. It's just that we haven't found them yet." He paused for a moment and suddenly thought of a problem. He asked Huanglong, "That's right, did the patrolling guards on duty last night interrogate them? Did they find anything?" Huanglong nodded and then shook his head. "I have also interrogated them, but they didn't find anything." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said in a low voice, "If that's the case, the person who did this is a strong person. He didn't alert anyone and didn't leave any clues. Of course, there's another possibility, which is that when the other party took action, they avoided the patrolling guards." Huanglong suddenly came to a realization and asked, "Master, you mean, it's very likely that someone from our sect is involved in this matter, acting as a spy for the other party?" "Yes." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "There's another possibility, which is that it's the doing of a strong person from our sect." Huanglong frowned and said with a heart full of doubts, "But I have already counted the number of disciples in the sect. All the deacons and elders are present, there's no one missing." Ji Tianxing looked at him with a sharp gaze and asked, "Then how many disciples are there? Are there any missing people?" Huanglong thought for a while and quickly answered, "There are 3 disciples in the inner sect who are not present. 2 of them are out on missions. There's only 1 disciple called Su Qing. I don't know why, but he's also missing." Ji Tianxing's eyes immediately brightened and said in a dignified tone, "Immediately investigate this Su Qing's background. When did he enter our sect?" Huanglong quickly answered, "There's no need to investigate. I still remember this person's identity and information. Su Qing entered our sect 2 years ago. He has outstanding talent, a bright mind, and is very good at talking and doing things. Moreover, his parents are dead and his family is destroyed. He has no relatives." Ji Tianxing's eyes flashed with a thoughtful look and said in a low voice, "At present, it seems that this person is the most suspicious. Immediately send someone." "No, I will personally investigate this matter. I want to see who has the guts to make a move on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains." Huanglong quickly cupped his hands and bowed, saying respectfully, "Master will investigate this matter personally. I'm sure you'll find the truth." Chapter 2230. Ji Tianxing did not waste any time and simply got up and left the secret room. He first went to the west courtyard and checked every disciple's room. There were no signs of fighting in the room, so naturally there were no clues. However, Ji Tianxing also judged that the other party must be very strong, possibly a martial saint expert. He used his divine sense and time reversal to deduce the situation of the west courtyard last night. As a result, he vaguely sensed a strong aura that had been active in the west courtyard. This proved that his guess was correct. It was indeed done by a martial saint expert. Moreover, he had acted alone. Therefore, he left the west courtyard and investigated the surroundings of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. An hour later, he found a clue halfway up the back of the mountain. On a large millstone on the cliff, he found some clues. There were a few footprints on the fine dust on the surface of the rock. Some of the footprints were slightly smaller, while the others were slightly larger and the traces were slightly heavier. It was impossible to find such hidden traces with the naked eye. Ji Tianxing also used his divine sense to discover this detail. It turned out that there were two people who had come to this deserted cliff and stayed on the millstone. Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment, then guessed the clues. One of the footprints is most likely that of the martial saint expert. The other footprint is most likely that of the other party's spy, which is the inner disciple who went missing today, Su Qing. After understanding this point, he sank into deeper doubt. That martial saint expert, using Su Qing as a spy, sneaked into the sect in the middle of the night and kidnapped more than 20 inner disciples. What does that person want to do? Who is his real target? Where did he take the 20 or so disciples? With such doubts, Ji Tianxing released his divine sense and used the time reversal secret technique to search for clues on the peak of the mountain. After busying himself for 2 hours, he finally found a clue. After that mysterious expert kidnapped more than 20 inner disciples, he flew towards the north. In the sky and on the peak of the mountain, there were still traces of extremely weak magic power fluctuations. Other than Ji Tianxing, no one else could find out, not even the Huanglong Taoist. Thus, Ji Tianxing left the Pillar of Heaven's mountains alone and flew towards the north. To the north of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, there was an endless mountain range and a sea of trees, spanning hundreds of thousands of miles. After crossing this area, they were very close to the sphere of influence of the 72 cities. A thought flashed through Ji Tianxing's mind. He secretly speculated that this matter wouldn't have anything to do with the 72 cities, would it? Could it be that the people of the 72 cities wanted to join Tianzhu Mountain, but were rejected by the Huanglong Taoist, so they held a grudge? Or perhaps, the conservative faction of the 72 cities learned that someone wanted to betray them and took revenge on Tianzhu Mountain? These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianxing's mind, but he quickly rejected them. After all, these conjectures were simply unfounded. Unknowingly, Ji Tianxing had flown for an hour, covering more than 10,000 miles. During this process, he released his divine sense to cover the surrounding 1,000 miles, searching all the way. However, in the vast mountain range and the deep sea of trees, there were only ferocious demonic beasts, and no traces of martial artists. Ji Tianxing temporarily lost the clues and direction, and couldn't help but feel anxious. He stopped on top of a towering mountain peak, frowning as he pondered about his next plan. At this moment, a ray of light flew from the sky and landed in front of him. He stretched out his hand to grab it, and realized that there was a communication jade slip in the ray of light. It was a pure white communication jade slip, and on the surface, there were pictures and seal words of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and it contained the aura of the Huanglong Taoist. Ji Tianxing hurriedly released his divine sense and entered the jade slip, reading the message from the Huanglong Taoist. Master, Su Qing, that bastard, sent a message. He said in the jade slip that if you want to save the 26 disciples, you have to rush to Feng Ying Mountain within 2 hours. Also, you can only go alone, or else all the disciples will die. The Huanglong Taoist's tone was very anxious, and it was filled with anger and murderous intent, because reality had proven that Su Qing was indeed a traitor, and he was the enemy's spy. Ji Tianxing also frowned, and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. He muttered to himself, "It seems like the enemy has planned this, and their target is not the disciples." He was just worried that he wouldn't be able to find any clues, but the enemy took the initiative to send a message, asking him to save the disciples. How could he not see through such an obvious plot? However, even though he understood, he couldn't just leave them to die. Without any hesitation, he turned and flew towards Feng Ying Mountain. Feng Ying Mountain was to the west of him, about 10,000 miles away. It was a tall mountain filled with red maples and green maples. Every time this season, the maple leaves would fill the sky, and the scenery was very pleasant. At this moment, the Huanglong Taoist sent another message. "Master, the enemy is obviously plotting something, and it is very likely that they are targeting you. You must not go alone. Please wait for a moment, I will immediately bring people to meet you." Ji Tianxing read the message in the jade bamboo slip and hurriedly replied to the Huanglong Taoist. "Huanglong, you will guard the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Do not go out on your own in case the enemy is trying to lure you away. This is an order. Other than martial gods, no one can do anything to me. You don't have to worry." After he finished speaking, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and sent out the jade bamboo slip. Swoosh! The jade bamboo slip flew into the sky and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. About half an hour later, Ji Tianxing arrived at Feng Ying Mountain at lightning speed. The sun had already set and night was about to fall. Looking down at Feng Ying Mountain from the sky, one could only see the hazy view of the tall mountain, and one could vaguely see a large patch of red and dark green maple trees. In the dense forest, the ground was covered with red maple leaves, and it looked like the ground was covered in flowing fire. Ji Tianxing's face was cold as he landed on the peak of the mountain, and he stood quietly in the forest. His divine sense was like mercury, spreading out in all directions and enveloping the entire mountain peak. Every maple tree on the mountain, every leaf, and even every worm in the mud was clearly explored by him. However, to Ji Tianxing's disappointment, there was no one on Feng Ying Mountain. There was not a single shadow, nor was there any ripples of spiritual energy. It was as if no one had been here. Suddenly, a patch of red maple leaves on a patch of grass 100 meters away attracted Ji Tianxing's attention. He walked 100 meters and arrived at the patch of grass. He lowered his head and looked down. Thousands of fiery red maple leaves were quietly spread out on the grass, forming 3 big words. Unveil Valley. Seeing those 3 words, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned, and a thick sense of anger flashed across his eyes. "Damn it! How dare you trick me? You sent a message saying that you were at Feng Ying Mountain, and now you want me to go to Unveil Valley?" While he was furious, he was also secretly on guard. The other party was obviously very cunning, and would definitely be difficult to deal with. However, he was not afraid. No matter who the other party was, he was confident that he could deal with them. Chapter 2231. The Unveil Valley was thousands of miles north of Maple Shadow Mountain. It was a desolate and uninhabited deep valley. There was no sign of human habitation for tens of thousands of miles around. Normally, no one would go there except for demons and ferocious beasts. Ji Tianxing suppressed his anger and strode across the night sky, flying towards the north. Another half an hour passed. When he arrived at the Unveil Valley, the dark night sky was already lit up with dim stars. He stood in the sky above the valley and looked down at the Unveil Valley, his eyes cold and murderous. The valley was hundreds of miles wide and was filled with weeds and shrubs. There were many places where rocks could be seen. The valley was thousands of feet deep and was surrounded by a few mountain ranges. The mountains were covered with dense forests. In the dark night sky, the cold wind whistled and swirled above the Unveil Valley. Ji Tianxing looked around and found that there was no light in the Unveil Valley and there were no fluctuations of magic power. There were also no traces of martial artists. He could not help but frown and thought to himself, Could it be that this is also a pretense, and that guy is playing the trick of a crafty rabbit having 3 burrows? At this moment, a flame suddenly lit up in the depths of the Yuanzhe Valley. A dark red flame as thick as a water tank bloomed in the night sky and swayed with the night wind. Ji Tianqing turned his head and saw that there seemed to be a black shadow standing beside the flame. The black shadow was too far away and it was blurry, as if it had merged with the night sky and he could not see it clearly. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing stepped out 30 miles and landed in the Yuanzhe Valley. He stood 1,000 feet in front of the black shadow. At such a close distance, he could see clearly that it was a tall man in black. His aura was restrained and powerful. Under the mask, a pair of long and narrow eyes flashed with a sharp and frightening cold light. Ji Tianqing could immediately confirm that this man in black was the martial saint expert who had sneaked into the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and kidnapped more than 20 disciples. He stared coldly at the other party and asked in a low voice, "Who are you? Why did you kidnap my disciples?" The black-robed man's eyes narrowed slightly, revealing a mocking expression. He said in a playful tone, "Of course it's to lure you here. As for who I am, you'll naturally understand the moment you die." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and thought to himself, "Sure enough, he's coming for me." He sized up the black-clothed man with sharp eyes, using his soul consciousness to check the other's aura. After a short moment, he frowned and muttered to himself, "Strange, this person's aura and voice make me feel a sense of déjà vu. It seems that I've fought with him before? Who could he be? Who can't wait to kill me?" At this moment, the black-clothed man waved his palm and sent out a gust of strong wind, extinguishing the flames on the ground. In the next moment, the edges of Yuanzhe Valley lit up with more than 40 dazzling lights at the same time. Swish! Swish! Inside each of the 5 colored lights was the figure of an agile or burly martial practitioner. A total of 38 martial practitioners, all wearing black armor and helmets, holding Dharma treasures and weapons in their hands, exuding a violent murderous aura. Immediately after, the earth began to rumble and tremble. The ground rose into the sky with a golden light, illuminating hundreds of miles of the night sky. In the blink of an eye, the golden light that rose into the sky condensed into a protective shield with a radius of 100 miles, enveloping the entire Yuanzhe Valley. This was a saint-level array, with a strong defense and great power. An invisible suppressive force poured down from the night sky, like a giant mountain that was tens of thousands of feet high, fiercely suppressing Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was not surprised by this. As he circulated his soul consciousness to dissolve the suppressive force, he did not forget to sneer at the black-clothed man. "No wonder you wanted to kidnap my disciples and deliberately lure me here. So, you knew that you were no match for me, so you could only set up an ambush here. Ha ha! But you're still too naive. Do you think such a despicable trick can defeat me?" The black-clothed man immediately frowned and shouted in a low voice, "Ji Tianqing, you're too arrogant. 2 years ago, you were like an ant in front of me. Even now, I still treat you like a chicken or a pottery dog. You can be arrogant and spout nonsense as you like. Anyway, I'll take these as your last words." Ji Tianqing had been suspicious. The aura and voice of the black-clothed man were familiar to him. At this time, the black-clothed man did not disguise himself and exposed his real voice and aura. He immediately guessed his identity. "You are Yi Lu Shui. It's you." Ji Tianqing's eyes widened in anger. His gaze became as cold as ice and as sharp as a blade. The black-clothed man was also stunned for a moment. Then, he realized that his voice had exposed his identity. He did not intend to hide his identity. Since Ji Tianqing had seen through him, he did not want to hide anymore. Swoosh! He stretched out his hand and pulled off his mask, revealing his real face. A handsome pale face, snow-white hair hanging down from his temples, and a white beard above his lips. On his forehead, the small sword mark flickered with lightning. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a sneer and said in a cold voice, "That's right, it's me. You didn't expect it, did you? You escaped twice before, but this time, you won't be able to escape. You're dead for sure." Ji Tianqing glanced at him, and pointed at the more than 30 cultivators around him. He sneered and said, "With just you and those trash?" The more than 30 armored cultivators all had the strength of the third or fourth layer of the Crossing Calamity realm. On the Shenwu continent they were all slightly famous martial lords. Their strength was quite good. However, to the current Ji Tianqing, they were just a bunch of chickens and pottery dogs. Yi Lushui glared at him and shouted angrily, "Don't be so arrogant, little thief! Cut the crap! I'll kill you now!" Following his order, the more than 30 black-armored cultivators around the valley all waved their magic treasures and weapons and charged at Ji Tianqing. Sword lights and saber lights that covered the sky, colorful magic lights, and all kinds of hurricanes immediately drowned Ji Tianqing. Yi Lushui also controlled the ceiling formation and released a terrifying power to suppress him. He immediately fell into a dangerous situation. His strength was also suppressed by 30%, and he couldn't move an inch. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing used his ultimate move without hesitation. "Celestial Dragon Tyrant Body!" he shouted angrily. His body lit up with a golden light that soared into the sky, and he immediately turned into a 30-meter-tall golden-armored giant. He slapped out a golden light with his left hand, which turned into a mountain-sized golden dragon claw and slapped at the black-armored cultivators on the left. He waved the sword of Burial of Heaven with his right hand and slashed out a 1,000-meter-long golden sword, which slashed at the cultivators on the right. Bang! 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 With a deafening sound, 4 black-armored cultivators were hit by the golden dragon claw. They flew back with blood spurting out of their 7 orifices and smashed into the edge of the valley. After the 4 fell to the ground, their bodies were all twisted and deformed. Half of their bones were broken. 3 black-armored cultivators were hit by the giant sword and were split in half on the spot. Blood splattered everywhere. Chapter 2232. Such a stark contrast caused many of the black-armored martial artists to tremble with fear, their hearts filled with fear. Everyone's attacks also paused, and many people subconsciously retreated. Yi Lushui was furious, and shouted with a gloomy face, "No one is allowed to retreat, no matter the price. We must kill Ji Tianqing." Those black-armored martial artists did not dare to disobey, and immediately gathered their courage to attack Ji Tianqing. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Once again, an overwhelming amount of sword light and saber light and magic light poured down like a torrential flood, drowning Ji Tianqing's figure. Yi Lushui also used all his strength to control the ceiling array, releasing an invisible force that attacked Ji Tianqing's divine soul. Ji Tianqing was about to counterattack, but his divine soul was suddenly attacked, and he felt a sharp pain in his mind, and his consciousness became a little blurry. But this only lasted for a moment, and the heaven-mending orb immediately released a dense white light to protect his divine soul. The sharp pain and dizziness disappeared, and he waved the sword of Burial of Heaven with murderous intent, and used a secret technique. Sword Rain. He formed a sword art with his left hand, and waved the sword of Burial of Heaven with his right hand, stabbing out 360 rays of cold light, forming a huge seal. Swoosh! The seal with twinkling starlight disappeared into the night. Then, the night sky above Yuanzhe Valley lit up with starlight. Tens of thousands of starlight spots lit up the night sky, and fell like a meteor shower. As the starlight rapidly approached, everyone could see clearly that each light spot was a giant starlight sword. Tens of thousands of starlight swords were arranged in a special position, forming an extraordinary sword array that covered the sky. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. With sharp piercing sounds, the tens of thousands of giant swords descended at the same time, drowning the entire Yuanzhe Valley. Bang, 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 bang. The giant starlight swords bombarded the golden light shield within 100 miles, and a series of deafening noises spread thousands of miles in the night sky. The seemingly indestructible golden light shield was as fragile as paper under the bombardment of the giant starlight swords. A series of cracking sounds could be heard, and the golden light barrier was immediately filled with numerous cracks, creating a huge hole in it. After a short breath, the huge golden light shield collapsed and disintegrated. The remaining thousands of starlight swords poured down like a storm in the valley, drowning Yi Lushui and the black-armored martial artists. Boom, boom, boom. The loud noises shook the world. The barren Yuanzhe Valley was immediately bombarded with countless holes, and smoke and dust splashed into the sky. It wasn't just the valley that was shaking. Even the surrounding land for 1,000 li was trembling, tens of thousands of ravines splitting open. What an earth-shattering sword rain of destruction! Yi Lushui was very powerful. With the protection of the divine weapon, he was able to resist the attack of the starry sword rain. But Yi Lushui, Yi Lushui, Liushui, in just a few breaths, more than 30 black-armored martial artists were blasted into pieces by the giant starlight swords and turned into minced meat and blood on the ground. After their bodies were destroyed, their souls escaped one after another, trying to escape Yuanzhe Valley. However, only the souls of a few lucky ones managed to escape the valley. The souls of the rest were blasted to pieces by the giant starlight swords and scattered in the ruins. After a long time, the earth-shattering noises subsided, and the deafening noises dissipated. Peace was restored in Yuanzhe Valley. Ji Tianxing stood in the night sky unscathed, holding the sword of burial of heaven. His clothes fluttered, and his whole body was filled with a sacred and majestic domineering aura. 60 miles away from him, Yi Lushui was also standing in the night sky, staring at him with a ferocious face. Yi Lushui was only slightly injured, but he looked quite miserable. His white hair was scattered on his shoulders, and his purple robe was torn in many places. A pile of rags fluttered in the night wind. There were 2 wounds on his left and right arms, and there was a dark red blood stain at the corner of his mouth. Ji Tianxing. Yi Lushui's eyes were as gloomy as ice, and his expression was as ferocious as a devil's. He roared in a hoarse voice, "You should die 1,000 times, 10,000 times." His tone was full of resentment, and it was full of monstrous hatred. Ji Tianxing looked at him indifferently and said calmly, "I've said it before, you and those trash can't do anything to me, and you'll only be courting death. What else do you have? Just use it, or you won't have a chance." His tone was calm and firm, and it was unquestionable. Yi Lushui grinned, and slowly stretched out his right hand, and a black cloth bag appeared in his palm. "Didn't you chase me all the way here to rescue your disciples? What? Have you forgotten them?" Suddenly hearing this, Ji Tianxing's face stiffened, and he asked in a cold tone, "Yi Lushui, what did you do to those disciples? Do you want to threaten me with the lives of those disciples?" Yi Lushui quickly shook his head and sneered, "Ha ha! How can I be so naive? You're the decisive and ruthless Kenshin. Why would you care about the lives of those ants? This seat just wanted to let you see how miserable their outcome was." As he spoke, he waved his right hand, opened the black cloth bag, and shook it a few times. Suddenly, more than 20 figures fell out of the cloth bag, and fell into the ruins like dumplings. Plop, plop, an entire 26 figures fell into a deep pit, emitting a wave of muffled sounds and causing clouds of dust to spray into the air. Ji Tianxing recognized them at a glance, and they were the inner disciples of the Pillar of Heaven Mountain. However, all 26 disciples were covered in blood, lying motionless in the deep pit, and there was no sound at all. Ji Tianxing took a closer look, and it turned out that those disciples were all dead, and they had all become cold corpses. More than 20 corpses were lying in the deep pit, and they looked very miserable. Some of them were bleeding from their 7 orifices, some had their heads cut off, and some had their limbs cut off. Some of the corpses were in the most miserable state, and the whole body had become a mess of minced meat, and they did not look like humans anymore. Seeing this shocking scene, Ji Tianxing's pupils contracted, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent, and his aura was as cold as ice. Raging anger and murderous intent surged in his chest, and his fists were clenched so tightly that they made cracking sounds, and his blood was boiling. Yi Lu Shui, how can you be so cruel and vicious? I swear, I will cut you into pieces tonight, and avenge my disciples. Yi Lu Shui saw that he was so angry, and laughed complacently. Ha 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 ha! Aren't you the ruthless and superior Kenshin? Why would you care about the lives of mortals and ants? You're angry, right? This seat likes to see the look on your face when you're about to go mad with rage, but there's nothing you can do. As he spoke, he slowly stretched out his right hand, and a dense purple light lit up in his palm. If I wasn't confident, why would I lure you here? Chapter 2233. Following Yi Liushui's words, in the palm of his right hand, a mysterious ruler that was 5 feet long and dark purple in color appeared. The ruler was as wide as a palm, and its surface was engraved with mysterious patterns and symbols. It flickered with a dense purple light and emitted a mysterious and cold aura. Yi Liushui placed his left hand behind his back and held the purple ruler in his right. He pointed it at Ji Tianxing and sneered confidently. Ji Tianxing, die. Ji Tianxing remained silent as he stared at the purple ruler in Yi Liushui's hand. His eyes flickered with a cold glint. This ruler, why does it look so familiar? Where have I seen it before? He muttered to himself, his face full of disbelief. After frowning for a moment, he suddenly remembered. His expression changed, and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. So it's this. It's the extreme soul-severing ruler. He finally recalled that he had seen this purple ruler in the Tianxian continent when he had fought with the ancient demonic emperor. At that time, the ancient demonic emperor had used this ruler to dig out the deity heart of the imperial monarch Manor's lord and slaughter millions of human soldiers. He had fought fiercely with the ancient demonic emperor and had only managed to kill him after a narrow escape. After the ancient demonic emperor died, the extreme soul-severing ruler had shattered the void and flown away. Back then, the imperial monarch had reminded Ji Tianxing that the extreme soul-severing ruler was a true divine weapon and must have come from the Shenwu continent, from the hands of a deity powerhouse. Many years had passed since then. After Ji Tianxing had come to the Shenwu continent, he had experienced many storms, but he had never seen the extreme soul-severing ruler again. He had almost forgotten about it, but now the extreme soul-severing ruler had appeared once again. It had actually appeared in Yi Liushui's hands. How could Ji Tianxing not be shocked? He instantly understood. Yi Liushui's extreme soul-severing ruler must have come from martial god Tianju. In other words, the deity powerhouse who had secretly colluded with the ancient demonic emperor was also martial god Tianju. At this moment, Ji Tianxing came to a sudden realization and finally understood many things. At the same time, he was sure that martial god Tianju was up to something. Yi Liushui saw Ji Tianxing's expression change greatly and heard his low shout. He immediately frowned and asked suspiciously, Ji Tianxing, what did you just say? How do you know the name of this ruler? When have you seen this thing? Ji Tianxing was awakened by his words. He looked at him coldly, and the corner of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. It seems like even though you're martial god Tianju's lackey, you're not fully trusted by him. You're still in the dark. Clearly, Yi Liushui did not know that martial god Tianju had secretly colluded with the demon race. Or perhaps, martial god Tianju had once lent the Tian soul-severing ruler to the ancient demon emperor, and Yi Liushui did not know about this. Yi Liushui didn't understand what he meant. He frowned and shouted angrily, Humph! Stop trying to be mysterious in front of me. Go to hell. As soon as he finished speaking, he slashed at Ji Tianqing with the Taiyin soul severing ruler in his right hand. Swoosh! A dazzling purple brilliance, like a blade that was hundreds of feet long, cut through the void and slashed toward Yi Lushui. Before the saber light arrived, an invisible chill had already enveloped Ji Tianqing. Suddenly, his entire body seemed to be sealed in ice, and his blood froze. The divine soul in his mind was also penetrated by the cold chill, and there was a burst of tearing pain. Ji Tianqing only felt dizzy and his vision blurred. His consciousness became blurry. Seeing that the dazzling purple blade light was in front of him, and was about to hit him. At the critical moment, he hurriedly activated the power of the heaven-mending pearl, releasing a dense white light to protect his divine soul. The formless cold air was immediately dispelled by the sacred white light. His divine soul and consciousness returned to normal, and he woke up again. However, the dazzling purple blade light slashed down brazenly, and he had no time to dodge. Bam! In the muffled sound, Ji Tianqing was hit by the blade light on the spot, and a splash of pale golden blood splashed out from his chest, and his whole body flew out. He drew an arc in the night sky, and flew for a full 20 miles before he stopped, and with a plop, he smashed into the edge of the deep valley. Smoke and dust rose everywhere, and the earth trembled. After all, Ji Tianqing was 10 feet tall, like a god of war in golden armor, and his body was too big. He climbed up from the deep pit, and raised his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. Looking down, there was a long, bone-deep gully left on his chest and abdomen that was more than 10 feet long. Golden blood constantly gushed out from the wound, dripping onto the soil. The invisible cold chill was corroding the wound, quietly invading his body, and was quickly spreading. It is indeed a divine weapon. Even my celestial dragon tyrant body can't resist it. He murmured in a low voice, and hurriedly used his power to heal the wound, and activated the power of the heaven-mending pearl to dispel the power of the Taiyin soul severing ruler. At the same time, Yi Lushui held the Taiyin soul severing ruler, and flew over with a cold smile on his face. You are indeed the famous Kenshin. Even though you have reincarnated, the bloodline of the god spirit still flows in your body. However, you are destined to die tonight. Your sword of burial of heaven, and your bloodline of the god spirit, will all belong to the divine master. Yi Lushui sneered proudly, and once again waved the Taiyin soul severing ruler, and fiercely slashed out 3 dazzling purple light blades. Swish, swish, swish. 300 feet long purple light blades cut through the night sky like lightning, and slashed toward Ji Tianqing's head. The light blades locked onto his divine soul, and he had nowhere to hide. No matter where he ran, even if he hid in a different space, he would be hit by the light blade. At the moment of life and death, Ji Tianqing was surprisingly calm, and his eyes stared coldly at Yi Lushui. Even if you have a divine weapon, so what? You want to kill me? Not even in your next life. Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth and shouted angrily. He activated the power of the heaven-patching orb, and slashed toward the 3 purple light blades. God Slayer Sword. The dark and cold sword of burial of heaven burst out a dazzling white light, and it condensed into a giant sword that was 1,000 feet long and swept across the night sky. Pung, pung, pung. There were 3 consecutive explosions that shook the sky and the earth. The sacred white light giant sword suddenly slashed the 3 purple light blades, and suddenly the light blades were shattered and exploded. The white light giant sword's power didn't diminish, and it swept toward Yi Lushui again. Pung! Yi Lushui was caught off guard, and he was sent flying by the giant sword. He drew an arc in the night sky, and smashed into the ruins 30 miles away. Plop! The ground was smashed into a pit that was 1,000 feet deep, and dust filled the sky. Yi Lushui coughed twice, and he endured the pain in his chest, and climbed up from the deep pit. There was a bloody wound across his chest and abdomen. It was more than a foot long, and his internal organs were clearly visible. Dark red blood gushed out like spring water, and immediately soaked his robe. Yi Liushui's eyes widened in horror, and he looked at Ji Tianxing in disbelief. He exclaimed, "You! How is this possible? This is the ancient divine ruler. How can you resist the power of a divine weapon?" Chapter 2234. Ever since Yi Liushui had obtained the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler, he had been full of confidence. After half a month of planning, he had successfully lured Ji Tianxing to Yuanzhe Valley. Even though more than 30 elite martial artists had been killed, he was not discouraged. He thought that with the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler, he would be invincible. He would definitely be able to kill Ji Tianxing in one fell swoop. The facts had proven that the heavenly ruler was indeed powerful. He had only used one move to severely injure Ji Tianxing. This made him even more proud. He thought that he had Ji Tianxing's life in his hands. However, the scene in front of him made him shiver. His pride and anticipation had vanished. Ji Tianxing had blocked the power of the heavenly ruler. Instead, he had severely injured Yi Liushui. This was simply too inconceivable and terrifying. Yi Liushui could not imagine how Ji Tianxing had done it. He was only a martial sage. The sword of burial of heaven in his hand was only a holy sword. It was not a heavenly sword. Yi Liushui could not figure out why this had happened. Just then, Ji Tianxing flew to him and slashed down with the sword of burial of heaven. Broken Moon Sword. The sword of burial of heaven gave off a dazzling white radiance again. It formed a white sword radiance that was 100 feet long and slashed down with divine power. The entire Yuanzhe Valley was immediately illuminated by the white radiance. Yi Liushui's face, which was covered with blood, was filled with shock and horror, which was clearly visible. "Even a heavenly weapon could not kill you? I don't believe it." Yi Liushui was filled with grief and indignation. He jumped up unwillingly and slashed with the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler. The heavenly ruler lit up with a dense purple radiance and emitted a bone-chilling cold. It then slashed out a dazzling purple saber radiance. Bam! The saber radiance and the sword radiance collided, and there was a deafening explosion. Both of them exploded at the same time and turned into hundreds of millions of pieces that scattered in the night sky. The raging shockwaves spread out like ripples, sending Ji Tianxing and Yi Liushui flying. This time, the two of them were evenly matched. Both of them were shaken to the point that their internal organs were displaced and they spat out blood. Yi Liushui was holding the extreme Yin soul-splitting ruler, but he was not the ruler's master. He had not cultivated the technique to control the ruler, so he could not unleash the full power of the ruler. Ji Tianxing was only a martial sage, and the sword of burial of heaven was only a sacred weapon. Naturally, it could not withstand the power of a sacred weapon. However, he had been constantly activating the power of the heaven-mending orb, using the sacred white light to resist the might of the divine ruler. He would not be defeated in a short period of time. However, as time went on, it was hard to tell who would emerge victorious. After all, the heaven-mending pearl's power had yet to recover, and it wouldn't be long before its power was exhausted. "Kill!" Yi Liushui shouted angrily. He held the Taiyin soul-breaking ruler and attacked again. Ji Tianxing also roared. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed out a dazzling white sword light. Boom! Boom boom boom! The two of them fought in the sky above Yuanzhe Valley. Their figures split and merged, flashing in the night sky. The dazzling purple light blade and the white sword light collided. Dull thunderous sounds echoed in the night sky for thousands of miles. Violent and devastating shockwaves spread out in all directions, affecting everything within a radius of 2,000 miles. Yuanzhe Valley had been destroyed in the battle. It had become a deep ruin, and the ground was full of holes and cracks. Within 2,000 miles, the ground cracked and the mountains collapsed. All that could be seen was ruins. This intense battle lasted for an entire hour. The two of them had fought for tens of thousands of moves. They were like arrows at the end of their flight, and they looked miserable. Ji Tianxing could no longer maintain the celestial dragon tyrant body and returned to normal. His white robe was tattered and dyed golden with blood. There was not a single inch of his body that was intact. It was full of cracks and bloody holes. He was a bloody man. The injuries on his chest and back were the most terrifying. There were several bowl-sized wounds, and his organs and ribs could be seen clearly. Most importantly, the power of the heaven-mending pearl had been exhausted, and it had become dim. Without the support of the sacred white light, he could not withstand the power of the Tying soul-splitting ruler. Even his soul was about to be destroyed. Yi Liushui's injuries were even more miserable than his. His white hair was dyed red with blood. His left arm was chopped off, and his body was covered with more than 70 sword wounds of various sizes. The dark red blood had already dyed him into a bloody man. His magic power was also exhausted, and his consciousness was blurred. His body was swaying, and he could collapse at any time. However, he had an obsession in his heart. With his strong willpower, he persisted. He struggled to open his bloody eyes and stared at Ji Tianxing. He grinned and said, "Ji Tianxing, you are indeed strong and monstrous enough. I have to admit that you are the most powerful enemy I have ever met in my life. Without this ruler, I would not be your opponent at all. However, the outcome will still be the same. You will still die without a doubt." Ji Tianxing also bent down and sneered at Yi Liushui. "It's good that you admit it. Without the Tying soul-splitting ruler, you would have been torn into pieces by me. Now, both of us have exhausted our strength, and your injuries are worse than mine. I want to ask you, how are you going to kill me?" Yi Liushui raised his right hand and waved the Tying soul-splitting ruler. He sneered and said, "With this." As his voice fell, his right hand let go of the ruler, and his hands formed a mysterious spell, drawing arcs in front of him. As the spell was formed, the Tying soul-splitting ruler also lit up with dazzling light and flew into the night sky. Yi Liushui's strength had been exhausted, and he could not use the ruler to perform the secret spell. However, he still had one last trump card. That was to use the secret spell to control the Tying soul-splitting ruler, and let the ruler explode with the strongest power to kill Ji Tianxing. In the blink of an eye, the ruler that flew into the night sky expanded thousands of times, and became a ruler with purple light that was tens of thousands of feet long. The ruler was like a rainbow, and also like a giant sword that could split the sky. It exploded with destructive power and slashed toward Ji Tianxing. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In an instant, the Tying soul-splitting ruler slashed out 9 huge purple sword lights, which enveloped Ji Tianxing. Soul-splitting slash. Yi Liushui shouted crazily, and his eyes were filled with excitement and anticipation. The power of each soul-splitting slash was enough to split the sky and earth, and cut through all obstacles. Even if Ji Tianxing was in his best condition, he would not be able to resist the 9 soul-splitting slashes at the same time. Moreover, he was extremely weak at this moment. He was about to be hit by the soul-splitting slash and be chopped into pieces on the spot. Yi Liushui was very sure that Ji Tianxing had no chance of survival. Under the purple light, Ji Tianxing looked up at the night sky, and his face was filled with helplessness and hatred. However, he did not have the slightest hint of despair or resignation. When the soul-splitting slash was about to hit him, he suddenly stretched out his left hand, and a dazzling golden light shone in his palm. In the golden light there was a small, exquisite pagoda the size of a palm. Swoosh. Chapter 2235. Bam! 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 Even after a long time, the bam still lingered in the night sky. Yi Liushui stood in the night sky, covered in blood. He looked at the 9 bam! 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 He can't escape. How can he not die? Bam! 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 What did Ji Tianxing do? How did he escape from the bam? Bam! 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 The bam! Bam! The bam! 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 Ji Tianxing! Bam! 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 He! Bam! Bam! He! Bam! 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 Rage filled his heart, and a strong sense of defeat surged into his mind, making him so angry that he almost went mad. Bam! He! Bam! 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 If I don't kill you, how can I face the Divine Master? Yi Lu Shui shouted with a ferocious face. He grabbed the tiny soul-breaking ruler with his right hand and flew to the north as fast as lightning. He clearly remembered that the golden light that caused Ji Tianxing to disappear was heading north. If Ji Tianxing really teleported away, he would definitely appear somewhere in the north. At the same time, in the 5th level of 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Tower, Shwa! A dazzling golden light suddenly lit up in the hall that was thousands of feet wide. In the middle of the hall, on the 100-meter-tall altar of the demon clan, a figure wrapped in golden light appeared out of nowhere. After the golden light faded, the figure appeared and gradually became more and more real. His clothes were ragged and his hair was disheveled. His white robe was dyed gold, and his aura was chaotic and weak. This was Ji Tianxing. At the moment when the soul-severing slash was about to kill him, he did not hesitate to use the secret key of the pagoda. Only then did he cross 1,000,000 miles and return to the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda. At that time, he was already at the end of his rope. The tiny soul-breaking ruler was so powerful that it had sealed the space within a few hundred miles. Regardless of whether he used the Armillary Heaven secret skill or the teleportation secret skill, he would not be able to dodge the soul-severing slash. Only the small golden pagoda could break the space seal and bring him back to the pagoda to avoid the calamity. Phew! Ji Tianxing heaved a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. His body went limp as he sat on the ground, panting heavily. The ground of the altar was cold and filled with the runes of the great Luo divine array. There were also 18 demon god statues around it. However, when he saw this scene, he only felt warm and safe. He closed his eyes and rested for a while before he muttered to himself, "Yi Lu Shui, this is the 3rd time that he has tried to assassinate me. It's a pity that he has the tiny soul-breaking ruler. Otherwise, I would have killed him tonight to prevent future troubles. There is a huge gap between the Sage Realm and the Immortal Realm that cannot be crossed. Even if I am invincible in the martial Sage Realm, I will not be able to withstand the power of a sacred weapon. After this, I must find a way to restore the Sword of Burial of Heaven to the Immortal Realm as soon as possible." After muttering a few words, he pulled himself together and sat cross-legged in the great Luo divine array. He took out an elixir and consumed it to heal his injuries. The hall returned to silence. Ji Tianxing remained motionless for 5 days and 5 nights before he recovered 60% of his strength. Although his face was still pale and his mind was weak, he was no longer in danger. It was a pity that the power of the heaven-repairing pearl had been used up. Otherwise, he would have recovered quickly with the help of the heaven-repairing pearl's divine power. When he thought of this, his heart ached and he was furious. After a few years, the heaven-repairing pearl had finally recovered a bit of power. This time, it has been used up. Damn Yi Lu Shui and martial god Tianju. If I don't tear you into pieces, how can I vent my anger? Ji Tianxing cursed angrily before he stood up and ended his cultivation. He looked around and stared deeply at the demon god statues and the altar beneath his feet. He could not help but fall into deep thought. Ever since I obtained the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Tower, I have entered it a few times and escaped death twice. However, I can only enter the first 5 levels and have not entered the 6th level yet. I wonder what is the secret of the 6th level of the Holy Pagoda? He pondered. In the past, he was only in the cross-calamity realm and could only enter the 5th level at most. Now that he was a martial sage, he should be able to try to enter the 6th level. Anyway, Yi Lu Shui has used up all his strength and is severely injured. He will not be able to find this place and will not dare to seek revenge at the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. Ji Tianxing thought. Since he had nothing to worry about, he would take the opportunity to try. He activated the God's Eye secret technique and his eyes turned golden. Together with his divine sense, he carefully observed the altar beneath his feet. Before he knew it, an entire day had passed. He observed the entire altar thoroughly and found many clues and clues. Combined with his understanding of the godly spirits and various secret techniques, many ideas appeared in his mind. Not long after, he had an idea and a plan. Then, he tried to channel his power and cast a dark golden dermic seal into the 18 demon god statues. However, when the seals entered the demon god statues, they were like clay oxen entering the sea. He was unwilling to give up and tried a few more times, but they all ended in failure. Therefore, he calmed down and pondered, trying to improve on his previous idea. A few hours later, he had another idea and began his second attempt. This time, after the plum blossom-like golden seals flew into the demon god statue, there was finally a reaction. The 18 demon god statues emitted a sacred golden light and moved around the altar. They began to change their positions. Finally, it's done. Chapter 2236. Ji Tianxing began to form mysterious and profound seals. At the same time, he began to observe the movements of the Yao God statues. He wasn't in a hurry and used a total of 12 hours to rearrange the 18 demon god statues. Buzz. The moment he finished casting the spell, the 18 statues lit up with white light at the same time, illuminating the entire hall. Holy white light converged on the origin immortal divine formation in front of him, forming a teleportation gate of white light. Whoosh! Ji Tianxing couldn't wait to step into the light door. His figure flashed and disappeared. A moment later, he left the 5th floor of the divine pagoda and entered a gloomy space. There was nothing around him, above and below him. Everything was pitch black as far as the eye could see, just like the cold void. But Ji Tianxing could clearly sense that this space was not the void. There was air, spirit chi, and all sorts of energy ripples. This is the 6th floor of the divine pagoda? Why is it so empty? There's nothing here? This shouldn't be the case. It's still a king-level divine artifact. Ji Tianxing frowned in confusion as he sharply observed his surroundings. Suddenly, he saw a faint white light in the distant night sky in front of him. He hurriedly flew over, and it took him an entire hour to get close to the white light. Upon closer inspection, he saw that it was a belt of light more than 10,000 feet long. The brightest light on the surface was white, while the inner layer was wrapped in red, blue, and green light. Moreover, the multicolored rays of light in this belt of light were all twisted and folded. Ji Tianxing could clearly sense that the belt of light not only contained powerful spatial energy, but also ripples of the power of time. The power of space and time? This is a scene created by the distortion of space-time? After a moment of shock, he suddenly understood something, and a look of shock and joy appeared on his face. In other words, the space-time of this floor is distorted and different from the outside world? Time distortion meant that the flow of time here was different from that of the outside world. It was possible that time had been accelerated. For example, 1 day in the outside world was 10 days here. It was also possible that time had been slowed down. 1 day in the outside world was only 2 hours here. This kind of space-time power could only be used and controlled by powerful God. In the mortal world, such a situation would only occur in extremely rare and special terrains. Ji Tianqing was overjoyed and secretly thought that he had picked up a treasure. In order to confirm his guess, he hurriedly left the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda. Shwa! With a flash of light, he appeared at the peak of the desolate mountain. At this moment it was the middle of the night. There were few stars in the night sky, and a dim yellow crescent moon was slowly descending. Ji Tianqing noted down the time, and returned to the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda, entering the 6th level. He sat cross-legged in the dark space and began to cultivate. After circulating his energy for 100 rounds, his spirit and strength had recovered a lot, and he ended his cultivation. He estimated that he had cultivated for about 4 days. Then, he left the divine pagoda and returned to the desolate mountain peak. The result stunned him on the spot. The sky was still dark, and the night wind was still whistling. Only around 2 hours had passed in the 5 elements world. Ji Tianqing couldn't help but reveal a joyful smile as he secretly clenched his fists. That's great! The 6th level of the divine pagoda is indeed a space where time accelerates. I have cultivated for 4 days, but only 2 hours have passed in the 5 elements world. The difference in the flow of time between the two is close to 50 times. In this way, I have cultivated in seclusion on the 6th level of the divine pagoda for 50 years, and only 1 year has passed in the outside world. Any martial artist would understand what this meant. If it were any martial saint who had picked up such an incredible divine artifact, they would be crazy with excitement. However, Ji Tianqing was experienced and knowledgeable, so he could still maintain his calm and indifferent. After all, in his soul's memory, he had seen a divine artifact that was even more powerful than this. He had also personally refined a few divine artifacts that could change the flow of time. Ji Tianqing's guess was confirmed, so he planned to cultivate in seclusion in the divine pagoda for a period of time. Not only to heal his injuries, but also to quickly increase his strength. However, before he went into seclusion, he sent a message to Huanglong Taoist so that Huanglong would not worry. Huanglong, the main culprit who kidnapped my disciples, is Yi Lu Shui. He set up an ambush in the Yuanzhe Valley and tried to kill me. I had a big battle with him and severely injured him. In the short term, he should not dare to invade the Pillar of Heaven's mountains again. I have also suffered heavy injuries and am now cultivating in seclusion in a secret realm. In about a month, I will return to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. During this period, you must guard the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and not let the enemy have a chance to attack. After sending the message, Ji Tianqing returned to the 6th level of the divine pagoda and cultivated in seclusion. At the same time, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains under the cover of night was quiet and peaceful. However, in the Pillar of Heaven's palace at the peak of the mountain, there were bright lights and many figures moving about. In the conference hall, Huanglong Taoist sat at the head of the table, his eyes solemn and his face full of worry. On both sides of the hall, there were a few elders in purple robes standing. There were also many messenger guards going in and out of the hall, constantly reporting the news. Great Immortal, we have searched the 6 Flowers Valley in the south, but did not find any clues. Great Immortal, dozens of guards have searched Fengying Mountain but did not find young Master Ji or any traces of a fight. Great Immortal, the 4 elders have already sent out 300 disciples to search the surrounding 100,000 miles. The news came one after another, causing the atmosphere in the hall to become heavier and heavier. Huanglong Taoist and the few elders' expressions became more and more worried and anxious. Ever since the inner disciples went missing and Ji Tianqing went to rescue them alone, it had been a few days. Until now, Ji Tianqing had not appeared and there was no news of him. The few elders were filled with worry, and Huanglong Taoist was even more worried. He had not slept for a few days, but he did not feel tired at all. Great Immortal, you are an omnipotent God. There is no one and nothing that can stump you. Now that the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is recovering, the situation is good. You will soon be able to restore your reputation. At such a crucial time, nothing must happen to you. Huanglong Daoist slowly closed his eyes and prayed silently in his heart. At this moment, a ray of spiritual light pierced through the night sky and came from afar. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, the ray of spiritual light flew into the conference hall and landed in front of Huanglong Daoist. He was instantly jolted awake and hurriedly opened his eyes. He stretched out his hand to grab the jade bamboo slip and impatiently read the message in it. After a while, when he finished reading the message in the jade bamboo slip, the worry and anxiety in his heart immediately disappeared. He slowly kept the jade bamboo slip and heaved a sigh of relief. A gratified smile appeared on his old face. Chapter 2237. Time flew by. After Yi Lushui left Yuanzhe Valley, he flew north for 3 days and 3 nights. He searched all the areas within tens of thousands of miles along the way. Needless to say, he couldn't even find Ji Tianqing's shadow. It was a waste of effort. His injuries were too severe, and he had used up too much of his spiritual power. After 3 days, he finally couldn't hold on any longer. Therefore, he was filled with resentment and unwillingness, and gave up on the search and pursuit. He found a hidden place in the mountains and hid in an underground cave. He circulated his spiritual power and healed his injuries for 7 days and 7 nights. After his injuries were stabilized and his spiritual power recovered by half, he left. It was impossible to continue searching for Ji Tianqing. After all, Ji Tianqing had escaped for more than 10 days. Where could he find him? He also thought that Ji Tianqing might have escaped back to Sky Pillar Mountain. But he was injured and his strength was weak. He couldn't go to Sky Pillar Mountain. Sky Pillar Mountain was protected by a super formation and Huanglong Daoist. It also had many trump cards in secret. In his current situation, if he were to attack the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, he would only be forced to flee. After thinking about it, Yi Lushui could only suppress his anger and leave Sky Pillar Mountain quietly. He returned to Heaven End Divine Nation. Although martial god Tianju said that if he didn't kill Ji Tianqing, he shouldn't go back to see him. But Yi Lushui believed that martial god Tianju would forgive him. Moreover, he had to report this matter to martial god Tianju in detail. 7 days later, Yi Lushui returned to Heaven End Divine Nation. On the night of his return, Yi Lushui didn't rest and rushed to the secret room in the depths of the Divine Palace. Divine Lord, subordinate Yi Lushui is here to ask for forgiveness. Yi Lushui knelt outside the secret room and kowtowed respectfully. The black stone door of the secret room lit up with white light and condensed into a mirror. A middle-aged man in a golden robe and a crown appeared in the mirror. He looked down at Yi Lushui with a gloomy face. Yi Lushui, you were delayed for a month before coming back to report the news. Have you completed the mission? Yi Lushui was already mentally prepared. He said guiltily, reporting to the Divine Lord, I devised a scheme to lure Ji Tianqing out of Tianju Mountain and set up an ambush in the wilderness. However, Ji Tianqing's strength far exceeded my expectations. He actually killed over 30 martial monarchs that his subordinates had mobilized. Even if this subordinate used the divine ruler, it would only result in a lose-lose situation. At the last moment, his subordinate was about to use the divine ruler to kill him. I don't know what method he used, but he was wrapped in a golden light and disappeared into thin air. Yi Lushui gave a brief account of what had happened. After he finished speaking, he kowtowed in fear and trepidation as he begged for forgiveness. He said, I was unable to complete the task and allowed Ji Tianqing to escape again. I am incompetent and I deserve to die. Please punish me, Divine Lord. The face of martial god Tianju in the mirror was as black as charcoal. He frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Bastard! You useless piece of trash! I gave you the Titan soul-severing ruler and you still couldn't kill him with the divine ruler in your hand? No matter how strong he is, he's only a martial saint. How could he resist the power of the divine ruler? Martial god Tianju was furious and scolded Yi Lushui. However, Yi Lushui didn't show any dissatisfaction, as if he was ready to be beaten or scolded. After scolding Yi Lushui, martial god Tianju's anger slowly dissipated. Yi Lushui saw that he had calmed down and said respectfully, reporting to the Divine Lord, this subordinate activated the Divine Ruler and used the soul-severing slash. The space within a few hundred miles was sealed. Ji Tianxing couldn't have teleported away. However, he was wrapped in a golden light and disappeared in front of this subordinate's eyes. This subordinate suspects that he might have a divine weapon in his hand, or he might have cultivated some divine technique. Martial god Tianju frowned and thought for a while. Then, he nodded in agreement and said, "Yes, only a divine weapon could resist the power of the divine ruler. This is most likely. As for the divine technique, Ji Tianxing is proficient in countless divine technique. However, he hasn't recovered to the divine realm and can't use them." Yi Lushui hesitated for a while and said, "Divine Lord, now that Ji Tianxing is powerful and has a divine weapon, he's invincible among those below the martial god realm. Even if this subordinate used the divine ruler, I couldn't kill him. Why don't we let him live for a few more years? After you've mastered the divine skill, you can come out and kill him personally." Before he could finish, he was interrupted by martial god Tianju. "Idiot! Are you scared out of your wits by Ji Tianxing? With his monstrous growth speed, I don't know how strong he'll be in a few years. He's a thorn in my flesh, a thorn in my side. I must get rid of him in the shortest time possible." Yi Lushui was stunned and said with a troubled expression, "But you still need a few more years to come out of seclusion. Currently, none of us can deal with him." Martial god Tianju squinted his eyes and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. He sneered and said, "If none of my subordinates can kill him, then what about Bei Mingshan? Pass down my order now. I want to make a deal with Bei Mingshan." Yi Lushui immediately understood. He quickly took out a communication jade slip and wrote down the order in the jade slip according to martial god Tianju's order. A month passed by unknowingly. That evening, at the Yin-Yang secret realm in the northernmost part of the divine ruins, a golden light suddenly lit up on a barren mountain that was thousands of feet tall. Whoosh! With a flash of light, a figure appeared on the mountain peak. It was a handsome young man in a white robe. He was tall and handsome. His eyes were as bright as stars and he emitted a mysterious and powerful aura. It was Ji Tianxing who had just come out of seclusion. He stood on top of a millstone and gazed at the setting sun with a playful smile on his face. "It's only been a month outside. I don't think anything has happened. However, who would have thought that I have been cultivating in seclusion in the 6th level of the Holy Pagoda for 4 years?" Ji Tianxing muttered to himself. His eyes were filled with mystery and dominance. For 4 whole years, he had been in the darkness of time and space, concentrating on his cultivation. Previously, he had won first place in the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly and received 300 million spiritual stones. After 4 years of seclusion, he had used up all the cultivation resources. Although he had used up a large amount of resources, his improvement was shocking. During this period, he had increased his cultivation level by 2 levels and successfully reached the rank 4 martial sage realm. Now, his combat strength was 10 times stronger than before. After 4 years of cultivation, the heaven-repairing pearl's power had recovered to its previous state. Ji Tianxing had absolute confidence that if he met Yi Lushui again, he would not be defeated. Even if Yi Lushui had the extreme Yin soul-splitting ruler, he would not be a threat to him. Whoosh! Chapter 2238. Dark North Mountain. At the center of the mountain was a dark brown wasteland. At the end of the wasteland was a giant mountain that was 3,000 feet tall. It was known as the Divine Mountain of Dark North Mountain. Below the waist of the divine mountain, it was pitch black, cold, and deathly silent. Above the waist of the mountain, the rocks and soil were dark red. It was extremely strange. Black clouds and demonic aura covered the entire divine mountain, causing it to appear indistinct in the clouds. At the peak of the divine mountain, there was a majestic, mysterious, and solemn black palace. That was the famous Baiming Palace. Back then, Luo Shui had entered this place to avenge Luo Li and fought the ancestral demon god. In that battle, more than half of Dark North Palace was destroyed and reduced to ruins. The present Dark North Palace was rebuilt by the demon race craftsmen. At this moment, deep within Dark North Palace, in a wide and dark hall, the walls were inlaid with blood crystals that shone with a dark red light. In the middle of the hall, there was a 100-meter-tall black altar that was inlaid with gems and skulls. A burly dark red figure was standing respectfully under the altar, quietly and solemnly. This was a demon race expert that was more than 10 feet tall. He wore a fiery red robe. The robe was embroidered with images of white bones and demons. A pair of ghost claws was embroidered on his chest and collar. He had no hair on his body. His head was bald, except for a few pieces of black scales that shone with a cold light. His hands that were exposed were also a pair of cold black claws. His ferocious face was also covered with a layer of black dragon scales. In his large eyes, there was a pair of dark blue pupils that flickered with dark blue flames. Without a doubt, this person was the strongest expert under the ancestral demon god, Great Demon Saint Ling Xian. He stood with his hands by his side and waited quietly for a moment. On the eerie altar, dark red blood flames ignited. Immediately after, a black figure that seemed both real and illusory rose from the blood flames. This figure was as strong as a black bear and emitted an extremely domineering demonic aura. It had 3 large heads, 6 pairs of blade-like wings on its pitch-black back, and 4 thick and sturdy arms in front of its body. Seeing this black figure appear, Great Demon Saint Ling Xian hurriedly knelt on one knee and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, primogenitor." The sinister and terrifying black figure on the altar was the projection of the ancestral fiend god. He opened his scarlet eyes and looked down at Ling Xian, who was below the altar, and asked in a deep voice, "Ling Xian, I have given you and Ming Tu full authority to handle the affairs of North Underworld Mountain. I want to heal in the Blood Sea Abyss and break through the shackles of the deity realm. What is it that you can't make a decision and have to ask this god?" Ling Xian lowered his head and replied in a respectful tone, reporting to primogenitor, "This subordinate has 2 matters to report. I must ask you to make a decision. Firstly, martial god Ji Tianxing has sent a message. He wants to make a deal with you. Please kill Ji Tianxing." Hearing this news, the ancestral demon god narrowed his eyes and laughed coldly. "Kakik, a martial god of Heaven's End can't even kill a puny martial saint? Humph. His original body is cultivating in seclusion. He must have sent his subordinate martial saint to assassinate Ji Tianxing, but failed. He can't do it himself, but he wants to kill Ji Tianxing immediately, so he can only come to me for help." At this point, the ancestral demon god paused for a moment and said in a venomous tone, "If I could leave North Underworld Mountain and kill Ji Tianxing personally, how could I let him live until now? What is martial god Tianju's condition?" Ling Xian quickly replied, "As long as you kill Ji Tianxing, the Kenshin bloodline will belong to you and the Burial of Heaven sword will belong to him. At most, in 5 years, he will end his seclusion and complete his divine art. At that time, he will kill martial god Luo Shui with his own hand. And the territory of Luo Shui Divine Kingdom will belong to North Underworld Mountain." Even with the shrewdness of the ancestral demon god, he couldn't help but be startled. He asked in astonishment, "Is martial god Tianju crazy? He wants to use martial god Luo Shui's life and the territory of Luo Shui Divine Kingdom in exchange for Ji Tianxing's life?" Ling Xian nodded, That's right. Looks like martial god Tianju hates Ji Tianxing to the bone and can't tolerate him anymore. The ancestral demon god sneered. It's not that he can't tolerate Ji Tianxing, but that he can't let Kenshin live. In order to find the way to ascend, he has already lost his mind and is willing to do anything. Ling Xian probed, Ancestor, do we agree to this deal? The ancestral demon god sneered and shook his head. I have to go all out to break through to the god realm, so I can't leave Sacred Mountain in the near future. Although this deal is very tempting, I can't agree to it. Since the ancestral demon god had made a decision, Ling Xian naturally wouldn't say anything more. He nodded. I understand, I will reject martial god Tianju later. The ancestral demon god nodded slightly and asked in a deep voice, What's the second thing? Ling Xian frowned and revealed an indignant expression as he reported, Ancestor, it has been 2 months since those foreign powerhouses invaded Dark North Mountain. In these 2 months, they have wantonly slaughtered our people and powerhouses, and they have already taken over 5 large regions in the south, totaling 200 tribes. In the beginning, they didn't understand our language, and only knew how to kill and plunder. However, since a month ago, they have gradually learned our language. Furthermore, they have used a secret technique to control the chiefs and priests of the various tribes. Although there are only 80 of them, they control the 5 southern regions and plan to occupy them for a long time. The ancestral demon god frowned fiercely, and his 6 eyes flickered with an ominous glint. He said in a sinister tone, It has always been us who invade others, but now we are being invaded by foreign races. Where did those foreign powerhouses come from? What are they trying to do? The Shenwu continent is so vast, and the 3 divine kingdoms' territories are even more abundant in resources. Why don't they invade the 3 divine kingdoms instead of staying in Dark North Mountain? Damn you, reptiles! Once I break through to the god realm, I will definitely tear them to pieces. Ling Xian hurriedly bowed and explained, Please calm down, Ancestor. Just yesterday, the leader of that group of foreign powerhouses sent a letter to Dark North Palace. That fellow calls himself Anyu, and he has decided to personally come to Dark North Palace to discuss an important matter with you. What? The ancestral demon god's eyes turned cold, and his entire body erupted with anger and killing intent. He sneered. He slaughtered my people and invaded my territory. Now, he dares to come to Dark North Palace to discuss an important matter with me? Ling Xian nodded. That's right. Anyu expressed in his letter that he does not wish to fight with you. Instead, he wishes to cooperate with you and conspire with you. What he means is that the Shenwu continent is vast, but Dark North Mountain is too small. With both of your talents, it is unfair for you and him to stay in this tiny place. Hearing this, the ancestral demon god immediately understood and sneered. So they are just as savage as my race. Chapter 2239. The next morning. To the north underworld mountain, there was not much difference between day and night. Even during the day there was basically no sunlight. The sky was covered by demonic clouds and black gas, and the world was dark. On the wasteland below the divine mountain, the cold wind whistled. At this moment, a black shadow that was thousands of feet long came from the sky in the south, quickly crossing the sky above the wasteland. That huge, long and narrow shadow looked like a huge ship. It was unknown what material this ship was made of, but it was completely black and cold, but it flashed with faint starlight. The ship had 3 floors, and it was tightly wrapped on the outside. Not only were there countless arrays on it, there were also rows of neatly arranged star crossbows, flashing with sharp cold light. On the sharp bow of the ship, there was a black flag that fluttered in the wind. On the tattered black flag, there was a vague, strange pattern that was emitting an ancient aura. Whoosh! After a few breaths, this mysterious black ship passed through hundreds of miles of wasteland and flew to the peak of the divine mountain. The ship stopped above the north underworld palace and floated motionlessly in the air. Then, a black iron door at the bow of the ship opened. Clang, clang, clang. Footsteps that sounded like metal clashing sounded. A tall and sturdy silver figure walked out of the door. This was a foreign race man wearing silver armor, and his eyes were as red as fire. His upper body was no different from a human, but there was a patch of black scales on his chest, and there were 4 circles of dark red patterns on it. Its lower body was very similar to that of a male lion, with 4 thick legs and wide hooves. If Ji Tianxing was here, he would immediately recognize that this foreign race man was an Yu. And Yu walked to the bow of the battleship and looked down at Beiming Palace with an indifferent expression. His lips curled into a cold smile. Then, 8 foreign race guards wearing black armor walked out of the ship. 6 of them stayed on the ship, and the other 2 came behind Yu and followed him closely. At the same time, outside the gate of the North Underworld Palace, the great demon Saint Ling Xian, the 3rd demon Saint Xing Tuo, and more than 10 experts of the demon race were waiting in the square. Seeing the black ship in the sky, everyone frowned, and a trace of seriousness flashed in their eyes. Whether it was the devil generals or the 2 devil saints, they could all feel the immense pressure. They were well aware that the giant black warship was the vessel of a foreign race powerhouse, and it was far more powerful than any of the flying ships on the Shenwu continent. Ling Xian glanced at Ma Tuo beside him and said in a low voice, "You and I will go and welcome Yu. The others will wait here." With that said, Ling Xian took the lead and stepped into the sky, flying towards the black battleship. Ba Tuo hurriedly followed, his posture full of vigilance. Shua! In the blink of an eye, Ling Xian and Ba Tuo arrived in the sky, stopping 100 steps away from Yu. The black battleship was covered by an invisible shield. Ling Xian and Ba Tuo couldn't enter it recklessly. They could only stand in the sky. The 2 of them looked at Yu coldly and bowed reluctantly. "Greetings, Lord Yu." Not long ago, the 2 of them had fought with Yu twice. However, the result was very tragic. Both of them were beaten half to death, and luckily managed to escape. Now that he saw Yu again, Ling Xian could still suppress his anger and killing intent. His expression was still calm. However, Ma Tuo's expression was cold. His eyes were filled with hatred. And Yu looked at the 2 of them and smiled. He nodded and said, "I am very happy to see you again." He said this in the language of the demon race. The accent was strange and awkward, but they could still understand. Ling Xian cupped his hands and said, "Lord Yu, if you have come with sincerity, please follow me. Let's go to the Dark North Palace to talk." And Yu thought for a moment before he understood what he meant. He immediately stopped smiling and frowned. "Of course I have come with sincerity. However, you mean you want to talk with me? Where is your Lord Founder? Why is he not showing up?" Ling Xian explained in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Lord Yu, the Honorable Lord Founder is cultivating in seclusion. He is not meeting with guests at the moment. As the great demon saint of the Dark North Mountain, I am also the Lord Founder's most trusted aide. Before the Lord Founder went into seclusion, he passed the authority of the Dark North Mountain to me. Therefore, I will talk with you today." This was what he had discussed with the ancestor devil god. The ancestor devil god would not show up. He would observe Yu in the dark. At the same time, he could maintain his mystery and prevent himself from being exposed. And Yu was even more unhappy. Flames danced in his scarlet eyes. He sneered, "Hee. I have come with sincerity, but your ancestor is so perfunctory. Since that is the case, there is nothing to talk about between us. But don't forget, I only used 2 months to snatch away 30% of your territory. At most a year later, the entire Dark North Mountain will belong to me. At that time, even if your ancestor comes to beg for mercy, it will be useless." After saying that, Yu turned to leave. Ba Tuo was instantly filled with anger. He was so embarrassed that he almost went berserk. Ling Xian was also furious. He could not bear such arrogant humiliation. However, He remembered the ancestor devil god's advice. He quickly shouted, "Lord and you, please wait. What I said just now is all true. Please calm down. Now that my clan is in a precarious situation, you do not have enough manpower. If we fight with each other, it will only be harmful. I hope that Lord and you will not be calculative. Let us sit down and discuss about cooperation. No matter what the conditions are, we can discuss it. This is also our ancestors' intention." And you had just turned and walked a few steps. After hearing this, he stopped. After thinking for a moment, he turned back and nodded with a smile. "Amen. Since your primogenitor is willing to cooperate with us, that would be for the best." As he said that, he walked out of the warship. Bringing along 2 black armored guards, he flew down to Dark North Palace. Ling Xian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He quickly brought Ba Tuo and followed. When Yu and the 2 guards landed on the plaza, 10 over-demon experts who had been waiting for a long time quickly bowed. And Yu did not bother to look at them. He walked through the crowd and stepped into the meeting hall. After 10 breaths of time, everyone entered the hall and took their seat. Ling Xian and Yu sat at the head of the table. The 2 black armored guards stood behind Yu without moving. Only then did Yu directly state his intentions. "It has been 2 months since I came to Dark North Mountain. During this time, I have conquered more than 200 tribes. I have gradually understood the situation of Dark North Mountain and the entire continent. I am very gratified. This is a vast and rich continent. It has inexhaustible resources. It is a pity that the most fertile land has been taken over by those lowly humans. Even you brave demons can only hole up in this barren and bitter cold land." Yemo thought to himself. Chapter 2240. And Yu's words were very provocative, causing Ling Xian's heart to heat up. After all, this was also his idea and the goal of the entire demon race. He pondered for a moment, then said to Yu with a serious expression, "Lord Yu, I believe this is your original intention, and you have the ability to do so. At the same time, this has always been my race's wish, and we have the same goal. But, before we decide to cooperate, I have a few questions that I hope you can answer." And Yu nodded slightly, looked at him calmly, and said, "Please speak." Ling Xian did not beat around the bush, and said directly, "The first question, Lord Yu only has 80 guards under his command. Although those guards were all very powerful, there were simply too few of them. You also know that the continent is vast, and there are billions of living beings." And Yu had expected him to ask this question, and could not help but reveal a confident smile, and explained, "I have already prepared for this question. As long as you demons are willing to cooperate, I will gather more people. Now there are 80 powerhouses, and soon there will be 800. Even if we succeed in conquering a large territory, the number can still rise to 8,000, or even 80,000. Also, although my race is few in number, you demons have many. This is also the reason why I want to cooperate with you. Most importantly, you don't have to do everything by yourself to rule a territory. Using people to control people is the best strategy." Ling Xian nodded, expressing his agreement, and continued to ask, "The second question, where did Lord Yu come from? On this continent, we have never seen you or your subordinate. Since we want to cooperate, we have to be honest, at least you can't hide your origin." And Yu immediately frowned, his eyes became cold, and said in a cold voice, "Haha. This answer, is it really that important? We come from the ground, we come from the sky, or from the underworld?" Ling Xian immediately understood what he meant, and bowed slightly, saying, "Sorry, I was rude. Since Lord Yu is not willing to tell, then let's forget about it. The third question, if we start to cooperate, how will we distribute the troops? How will we distribute the territories that we have conquered?" And Yu sneered, "Very simple, in the early stage of cooperation, we will allocate 500,000 demon warriors for me to use. As for the territories that I will invade, I will first choose a territory as my base camp. The territories that were subsequently occupied would be divided according to the amount of contribution. If it's not clear, then we'll split it in half. Ling Xian immediately frowned and said in a deep voice, Senior and you, our clan has just gone through a war that lasted for several years, and we lost over 10 million warriors. Now that we've just started working together, isn't it a bit too much for you to ask for 500,000 warriors? Is there a lot? And you looked at him from the corner of his eyes and sneered. I only need 500,000 warriors in the early stages. Once we reach the middle and late stages, I might need another 5 million warriors. If you don't even give me 500,000 warriors, then there's no need for us to cooperate. Ling Xian hurriedly waved his hand and said in a serious tone, No, what I mean is that as long as you show enough sincerity, I can give you 500,000 warriors. And you sneered. Sure enough, there are conditions. Tell me. Seeing that the time was right, Ling Xian revealed the plan he had decided on long ago. First of all, I would like to ask Lord and you to return the 5 regions of the south, as well as the 200+ tribes of my clan. My clan will choose a more suitable territory to be your headquarters. And you frowned and asked, where? Ling Xian smiled. South of Dark North Mountain, there's a region with a radius of 1,000,000 kilometers called the 72 Cities. There are 1 billion people there, 72 majestic cities, and endless mountain ranges. There are countless cultivation resources hidden there. And you had studied the map of Shenwu continent and knew that this region was indeed more fertile than Dark North Mountain. He couldn't help but be tempted, and after a moment of consideration, he nodded. All right, as long as you send 500,000 warriors, I can take down the 72 cities in half a month. Ling Xian nodded in satisfaction and continued, Aside from this matter, Lord and you needs to kill one more person in order to show enough sincerity. Kill who? And you frowned and sneered. Could it be one of the 3 war gods? If that's the case, then forget it. Ling Xian hurriedly shook his head. Of course not, it's just a small war saint. That young war saint is called Ji Tianqing, and he's the leader of Tianzhu Peak. You've studied the situation of the continent, so you should know that Tianzhu Peak is not far from the 72 cities. Furthermore, Tianzhu Peak's territory, population, and resources are much more abundant than the 72 cities. And you thought for a moment and smiled knowingly. This seat remembers now. I heard that the fiend army was defeated at the hands of this guy. You guys call him the killing god, and he's the one who slaughtered millions of demon warriors? Ling Xian nodded with a gloomy expression and said in a cold voice, That's right, it's him. My clan has a blood feud with him, and we can't live under the same sky. And you didn't care at all. If that's the case, then I'll agree to help you kill him to show my sincerity. However, after I kill him, I still want to take over Tianzhu Peak. At that time, Tianzhu Peak and the 72 cities will belong to me. Ling Xian had also guessed that An Yu was insatiably greedy and would make such a request. He took advantage of the situation and said, Tianzhu Peak can belong to you, but we want Ji Tianqing's corpse and his sword. And you nodded without hesitation and smiled. If that's the case, then it's settled. The deadline will be 10 days. Within 10 days, I will kill Ji Tianqing. As for you guys, you have to gather 500,000 warriors as soon as possible. I still have to lead them to open up new territory. After he finished speaking, An Yu laughed heartily and stood up to leave. He left the meeting hall with 2 black armored guards and flew towards the warship in the sky. Ling Xian, Ba Tuo, and a dozen demon generals all stood up to send him off. After a long time, the pitch-black warship in the sky flew away. Only then did Ling Xian and the rest relax. Everyone's expressions became serious, and Ba Tuo was filled with resentment. He couldn't help but complain. Despicable! That guy is too arrogant. He doesn't even put my clan in his eyes. He only has 80 guards, so what right does he have to talk about cooperating with my clan and even divide the world? Even if his strength is not bad, he's too arrogant. Does he think that the 3 divine kingdoms are pushovers? That he wants to conquer the entire Shenwu continent? Isn't that just wishful thinking? A dozen demon generals all nodded and agreed with Batu. They were very unhappy with Yu's arrogant attitude. Ling Xian waved his hand and sneered. You stubborn guys, do you know what expediency is? And Yu is ambitious, greedy and insatiable. Let them stir up the wind and rain, and help us get rid of the enemy. Chapter 2241. Hearing Ling Xian's words, Ma Tuo and the other generals came to a realization. It turned out that the ancestral godfiend had other plans. The cooperation with Yu was only a temporary measure. With the ancestral godfiend's strength and arrogance, why would he care about these foreign races? After figuring this out, everyone's emotions calmed down a lot. After whispering to each other for a while, everyone dispersed and left the conference hall one after another. Ling Xian was the last to leave. Not long after he walked out of the meeting hall, he met a woman in a black robe at the corner of the corridor. This woman was 7 feet tall and had delicate features. Her skin was light purple, and she looked no different from a demon. However, compared to a real demon, her body was petite and weak. However, her black robe was embroidered with the image of a skeleton and a demon. It was obvious that she was an internal affairs officer of Dark North Palace. After seeing Ling Xian, she bowed respectfully and said, "This subordinate greets the great devil sage." Ling Xian nodded and calmly said, "Aku, go and pass on my orders. Summon the chiefs of the Bay, Secret Flame, and Jialoa tribes to Dark North Palace for an audience." The woman called Aku cupped her hands and bowed. This subordinate obeys. After bowing, she did not seem to have any intention of leaving. After hesitating for a while, she carefully asked, "Great Devil Sage, I just saw a huge flying ship arrive in the sky, and a few strange-looking fellows flew down from it. Are those the foreign powerhouses who invaded the 5 southern regions and took away more than 200 of our tribes?" The great devil sage did not hide anything and nodded. "That's them." Aku frowned and pretended not to understand. "Why did they come to Dark North Palace? Are they here to ask for peace? Or do they want to negotiate a temporary truce with you?" The great devil sage shook his head and sneered. "Those foreign races are powerful and ambitious. They actually want to cooperate with us to divide Shenwu continent." Aku revealed a startled expression before covering her mouth and chuckling. "Isn't that too laughable? No matter how strong they are, they only have so few people. They actually want to divide the entire continent? The brains of these strange races must have been flooded with water. How did you reject them? Could it be that you directly chased them away?" Great Demon Saint glanced at her and shook his head. "Of course not. Wouldn't it be a pity if we don't make use of such a greedy and ambitious fellow?" A strange light flashed in Aku's eyes. He frowned and asked in surprise, "Great Devil Saint, do you really agree to cooperate with the pagans?" "Why not?" The Great Demon Saint walked towards the end of the corridor and said, "If you want to work with us, you have to show us enough sincerity and work for us. I asked him to attack the 72 cities and make them his headquarters. Return the 5 regions in the south to my race. In addition, he still had to kill his way to Tianzhu Mountain and get rid of that bastard Ji Tianxing. Humph, this is called killing someone with a borrowed knife without shedding any blood." At this point, the great demonic saint had already reached the end and was about to turn and leave. Aku's body suddenly stiffened, and a strong sense of anxiety flashed through his eyes. She hurriedly chased after the great demonic saint and persuaded, "Great demonic saint, you are a wise expert. How can you be deceived by those pagans? They are using our race to help them invade our territory and plunder our wealth and resources. Moreover, they have killed millions of our people and invaded more than 200 of our tribes. This is a blood feud. Now that you have agreed to cooperate with them, won't you disappoint those innocent people who died in vain?" Hearing her words, the great demonic saint stopped and turned to look at her with a cold and solemn expression. Aku, don't forget your identity. The great demonic saint stared into Aku's eyes and said indifferently, don't forget that you are just a lowly blood-robed guard. Although you are the most outstanding and quick-witted of all the blood-robed guards, I have appreciated you. It was I who appreciated your talent and promoted you step by step, allowing you to become the Internal Affairs Deacon today and enter Biming Palace. But don't forget that you are just a lowly Internal Affairs Deacon. Since when did you have the right to interfere in government affairs? The so-called blood-robed guards were originally puppets that the demon kings had captured from other continents using magical treasures and refined in the Blood Sea abyss. Now that 3 years had passed, most of the blood-robed guards had died in battle. They had either died in the line of duty or died tragically on the battlefield. Only a few of the blood-robed guards had survived, but they were all outstanding individuals. Among them, the most outstanding blood-robed guard was this woman named Aku. In the past 3 years, not only had her strength increased a lot, but she had also become very quick-witted, which was why the great demonic saint had placed her in an important position. However, the great demonic saint was naturally suspicious. When he saw that Aku was a little too talkative today, he immediately became angry and reprimanded her. Seeing that the great demonic saint was angry, Aku revealed a look of fear and trepidation. She quickly bowed and said, "The great demonic saint is right. This subordinate knows her mistake and has overstepped her boundaries." The great demonic saint looked at her coldly and said in a deep voice, "In the future, you must be careful with your words and actions. Only then can you live a long life. I have to teach you a lesson for today's matter so that you will remember. Go to the torture department and receive 50 soul punishment whips." Aku's body suddenly trembled, and her expression became quite unsightly. In the past few years in the North Underworld Mountain, she had experienced the cruelty of the torture department several times and the terrifying power of the soul punishment whip. Almost every once in a while, someone would be punished and their divine soul would be shattered by the soul punishment whips, dying on the spot. She had been hit several times by the soul punishment whip. Although she had kept her life, the pain and torture that went deep into her soul made her shudder. When the great demonic saint saw that she was standing there in a daze, he frowned and shouted angrily, "What are you standing there for? Why aren't you getting out of here? Do you want me to execute you?" Aku immediately came to her senses and quickly bowed to leave. The great demonic saint coldly watched her leave. When her figure disappeared at the end of the corridor, he frowned and muttered to himself, "This bitch is getting more and more presumptuous. After entering the North Underworld Palace, she actually dares to talk about and interfere with the government affairs." Thinking of this, he raised his hand and released a purple light, as if he was releasing some kind of signal. After a while, a hazy and distorted black shadow appeared behind him with a swoosh sound. The black shadow bowed and said in a hoarse and deep voice, "Greetings, Master. Please give me your orders." The great demonic saint's back was facing the black shadow, and he said expressionlessly, "Song-ing, secretly watch Aku and see what that bitch wants to do. If there is anything unusual, immediately report to me." "Yes, Master." The black shadow called Song-ing cupped his hands and disappeared into thin air. Chapter 2242. North Underworld Mountain. Jingshan Region's 100 Origin City. On the surface, this ancient city with 1,000 years of history was still peaceful. More than 800,000 demon civilians lived in the city built with black rock. It was a prosperous city. But in reality, this city had been occupied by an Yu long ago. The city lord and the priests of the major tribes were all under an Yu's control. Moreover, this city had become an Yu's temporary residence. At this moment, in the majestic city lord's mansion, an Yu was standing in the middle of the square, giving out orders with a solemn expression. In front of him, 9 black-armored foreign race guards stood in a row. The leader was the captain of the guards, Anyu's confidant. The 9 of them stood respectfully, listening to Anyu's orders. In the sky above the square, a black warship that was thousands of feet long floated, emitting a solemn and murderous aura. Anyu's sharp gaze swept across the 9 guards, and he said in a dignified tone, "There are too many things that I can't be bothered to explain to you. All you need to know is that if our race wants to establish a foothold here and develop, we can only rely on others. Even if we know that we will be at a disadvantage, we can only compromise. Temporary forbearance is for our long-term development. This world sealed by a mysterious force is far more fertile than the world we invaded before. If we can occupy this world, we can spend the next 1,000 years in peace, and we won't have to wander the stars anymore." The 9 guards bowed and said in unison, "Captain, please rest assured that we will complete the mission perfectly." And you nodded in satisfaction and said, "That martial sage named Ji Tianxing, since he can occupy a territory and kill millions of demons, he must have some tricks up his sleeve. Although all of you are elites and are piloting my warship, you must not underestimate him. Remember, not only must you kill him, but you must also return unharmed." The 9 guards bowed again and said in unison, "We understand." And you did not say anything else. He waved his hand and ordered, "All right, you may set off. I will wait for your triumphant return and bring back that kid's body and sword." The 9 guards bowed in unison, then stepped into the sky and boarded the black warship. Not long after, the black battleship flew high into the sky and headed south as fast as lightning. And you watched as the battleship disappeared into the horizon. Only then did he turn around and return to the city lord's mansion to continue handling his affairs. It was noon. Pillar of Heaven Mountains. The warm sunlight shone on the mountain peak, and the blue sky was filled with white clouds. Everything was peaceful. The disciples focused on their cultivation while the patrolling guards did their duty. Huanglong Taoist and the 2 elders were discussing the expansion of the Spirit Beast Garden in the study room. Ji Tianxing was meditating in a secret room in his residence in the Pillar of Heaven Palace. He came back a few days ago. Only Huanglong Taoist and a few elders knew about it. When Huanglong Taoist saw him, he was keenly aware of the change in him, and was shocked speechless on the spot. Only Huanglong could see that Ji Tianxing's strength had increased several times in the 1 month that he had been missing. He couldn't figure out how Ji Tianxing did it, but he absolutely believed that no matter what miracle happened to his master, it was only natural. As for Yi Liushui's matter, he didn't ask about it. He believed that his master would have a corresponding countermeasure and plan. What he needed to do was to protect the Pillar of Heaven Mountains and listen to his master's orders at any time. Unknowingly, 2 hours had passed. The sun was setting in the west. The warm sunlight made people feel even more lazy. Huanglong Taoist and the 2 elders finally agreed on a plan and left the study room together. At this moment, a loud bugle horn sounded in the sky. On the dojo in the middle of the holy city, a signal arrow shot into the sky and exploded in the sky, releasing a dazzling flame. Huanglong Taoist and the 2 elders stopped in their track. Their expressions changed and they frowned. "Is this a signal to warn of danger?" Normally, the guards on the dojo will only release the signal arrow when there is a strong danger. What's going on? Is there a strong enemy invading our sect? The 3 of them looked at each other and revealed a worried and confused expression. "Let's go and take a look," Huanglong Taoist ordered. He hurriedly brought the 2 elders out of the palace and flew into the sky. As soon as they arrived in the sky, the 3 of them saw a huge black shadow floating in the sky to the north of the Pillar of Heaven Mountains. From afar, the long black shadow looked like a huge ship, but it also looked like a magic treasure flying boat. It floated thousands of feet above the peak of Mount Li. It was shining with a faint white light and emitting an extremely powerful aura. Even though they were far apart, Huanglong Taoist could feel a huge pressure. He brought the two elders across the sky to the north of the peak of the mountain and observed the black warship from a close distance. With his eyesight and knowledge, he couldn't recognize what kind of flying boat it was. Even the words, pictures, and flags on the flying boat were unfamiliar to him. However, that powerful and heavy pressure still lingered in his heart, giving him a bad premonition. At this moment, the warship slowly turned around and aimed its left side at the Pillar of Heaven Mountains. Ka-ka-ka! With a series of crisp sounds, the metal plate on the black warship opened up, revealing a row of holes. Every hole was as thick as a water bucket. Inside the holes there were dark red dots of light. Huanglong Daoist and the two elders frowned. They were filled with doubts. The guards gathered from all directions, as well as a large number of disciples, frowned as they observed the warship. They started to whisper to each other. None of them had seen this warship before. They didn't know its power or use. However, everyone knew that the heavenly dome array left behind by Grandmaster Kenshin protected the Pillar of Heaven Mountains. No matter what kind of monster came, they could forget about invading the Pillar of Heaven Mountains. In the next moment, an earth-shattering explosion that sounded like a thunderclap from the ninth heaven suddenly exploded in the sky. Boom! On the left side of the black warship, the row of dark red holes suddenly shot out hundreds of dark red light pillars. They shot towards the Pillar of Heaven Mountains like lightning. Before anyone could react, the hundreds of dark red pillars of light slammed into the grand formation in the sky. Kaboom! Amidst the earth-shattering sound, a dazzling silver shield with a radius of 500 miles appeared. This silver shield that covered the sky was like a huge canopy. It was like an indestructible fortress that enveloped the entire Pillar of Heaven Mountains. The light shield was semicircular and was about a foot thick. It was formed by the condensation of bright starlight. It emitted a vast, cold, and mysterious aura. Obviously, the heavenly dome array was activated when the Pillar of Heaven Mountains was attacked. Even though the heavenly dome array was powerful, the silver light shield's defense was very strong. However, after being hit by the hundreds of dark red light pillars, the entire silver light shield shook violently. Layers of silver light rippled. Chapter 2243. Originally, only half of the disciples and guards had heard the dangerous sound of the horn. There were only about 300 people who had gathered in the sky to observe the battleship. However, after the heavenly dome array was bombarded by the battleship, the earth shook and the mountains shook. Most of the people were awakened. Other than those who were in seclusion and could not come out, almost everyone rushed out. Everyone was filled with doubts and worries. They rushed out of their houses and palaces anxiously and gathered in the open space and in the sky. Even the servants and odd-job workers were anxious and ran out to check the situation. After a while, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains stopped shaking and gradually calmed down. Everyone looked around and saw that the ground on the peak of the mountain had cracked open. The tiles of many houses had fallen to the ground and were broken into pieces. The dojo on the peak of the mountain was shining with a bright silver light. The jade-paved ground was lit up with dense array patterns. Obviously, the heavenly dome array was operating at full power to support the silver light shield and protect the entire Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Many disciples and guards had drawn their swords and sabers. They looked angrily at the battleship in the sky and roared angrily. "What the hell is that? How dare it attack our protective mountain array? Who dares to be so presumptuous in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? Are you tired of living? Coward who hides his head but shows his tail. How dare he not show himself? Everyone, don't panic. Listen to the orders of the elders and the great immortal. We will definitely annihilate the enemy." Although the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was suddenly attacked and caused a huge commotion, the disciples were not afraid. However, the disciples were not afraid. Instead, they were filled with righteous indignation. Everyone was furious and murderous. They could not wait to rush out of the protective mountain array and attack the black battleship. Huang Long Daoist stood in the sky and stared at the battleship with a gloomy look. He felt that something was amiss. A few other elders hurried over and gathered around him, whispering into each other's ears. Great Immortal, which force is that flying ship from? Why would they attack our sect for no reason? Great Immortal, should we rush out of the protective mountain array and launch a counterattack? Huang Long Daoist thought for a while and nodded slightly. The other party is aggressive and the Dharma treasure they used is very strange. Its power is extraordinary. Although the Heavenly Dome array can protect the sect, we cannot hide in the array. Otherwise, the sect's prestige will be tarnished. The few of you follow me. I would like to see who dares to behave so atrociously here. Then, Huang Long Daoist held his golden horsetail whisk and led the 4 elders out of the protective mountain array, and flew towards the black battleship. Shwa! 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 In the blink of an eye, the 5 of them were high up in the sky, stopping 1,000 zhang away from the battleship. Huang Long stared at the battleship with a piercing gaze. With a voice as loud as a bell, he shouted, "Who dares to invade the pillar of heaven's mountains? Tell me your name." The rolling sound waves were like muffled thunder, reverberating in the sky. However, the black battleship did not respond. No one appeared, and no one answered. After about 10 breaths, the hundreds of dark holes on the left side of the ship lit up with a dark red brilliance. Seeing this, Huang Long Daoist's face suddenly changed. He quickly shouted, "Get out of the way!" The elders also knew how powerful it was. They dodged without hesitation and immediately moved 10 miles away. In the next moment, the hundreds of dark holes burst out with a dazzling dark red light. Boom! With a deafening loud sound, hundreds of dark red light pillars gushed out and hit the silver light shield. Kaboom! Another loud sound that shook the 9 heavens exploded and spread thousands of miles away. The huge silver light shield was smashed into pieces and started to distort and sway. A destructive shockwave spread out in all directions. Huang Long Daoist and the 4 elders were swept away by the shock wave and were sent flying far away. The 4 elders were relatively weak. They were all bleeding from their 7 orifices and almost fainted. Only Huang Long Daoist, who was a martial sage, could withstand the power of the shock wave and was only slightly injured. The pillar of heaven's mountains was also hit and trembled violently. Countless cracks appeared on the ground, and cracks also appeared on the surrounding cliffs, causing countless rocks to fall down. Even though the silver light shield had blocked the attack of the dark red light beam and shattered the light beam into fiery fragments that filled the sky. However, the surface of the silver light shield was also covered with dense cracks, like a spider web. There was no doubt that if the silver light shield was hit 2 more times, it would be broken on the spot. Inside the protective formation, countless disciples were shaken and fell to the ground miserably. Everyone looked up at the sky and saw the cracks on the silver light shield. They were shocked and exclaimed, "Oh my God! Our mountain-protecting grand array was actually blasted apart. How is this possible? That black flying boat is actually so powerful? It's over. Once the protective mountain array is broken, who can protect us? That flying ship's power is too terrifying. If not for the protective mountain array, the entire sacred city would have been destroyed." In an instant, everyone's hearts were clenched and filled with fear and worry. After all, the most powerful Huang Long Daoist and the 4 elders were injured by the shock wave before they could even see who it was. At such a critical moment, no one knew how to deal with it. At this moment, the black battleship turned around and aimed its right side at the pillar of heaven's mountains. Ka. The black cover on the side of the battleship opened and revealed a row of crossbow cannons. Those crossbow cannons were all made of metal, and there was a powerful array at the base. There were 3-feet-long silver spears inserted. Each spear was as thick as the mouth of a bowl and was made of silver metal. They shone with silver-white starlight. Once these spears hit their targets, They would explode with terrifying power and destroy everything within a 1,000-mile radius. These were the star crossbows. The 3-feet-long crossbow arrows were made of star mithril, and the array at the base was also a sacred array that could continuously absorb the power of the stars. Even a martial sage would not dare to take the attack of the star crossbows head-on. Otherwise they would die. Huanglong Daoist and the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains had never seen the star crossbows before and did not know the power of these weapons. But when they were pointed at by the star crossbows, they instantly felt a sharp killing intent and a chill ran down their spines. No one doubted that when the hundreds of crossbow arrows shot over, the heavenly dome array, which was full of cracks, would be destroyed. The hundreds of crossbow cannons lit up at the same time and were crazily accumulating power. They were about to fire. At this moment, a golden light flew out from the Pillar of Heaven's palace and streaked across the sky like lightning. It came to the center of the dojo and landed on the huge sword steel. It was a handsome young man in a white robe. He was Ji Tianxing. Chapter 2244. Ji Tianxing's various legendary deeds had already spread across the entire continent. Even the rumor that he was the reincarnation of Kenshin was widely spread across the 3 kingdoms. The disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains had all heard of this news. In the past few years, Ji Tianxing was rarely seen and was often not at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Therefore, no one had thought of him just now. Now that he had appeared, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They now had a backbone and someone to rely on. In everyone's eyes, he was omnipotent and was best at breaking the impossible and creating miracles. He would definitely take care of that strange black battleship in the sky. In an instant, everyone's eyes were focused on Ji Tianxing. They were full of anticipation. Ji Tianxing stood proudly on the sword steel. His face was solemn as he stretched out both of his hands and formed a mysterious hand seal with a profound technique. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. More than 60 starlight seals were injected into the sword steel and transmitted to the entire dojo. Suddenly, the jade ground within 100 miles radiated even more dazzling starlight. Buzz! The mountain protection array that enveloped the entire Pillar of Heaven's mountains also emitted dazzling starlight and sped up. The cracks on the silver light shield also disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the black battleship lit up with dazzling silver light. Swoosh! 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 Over 100 star crossbows were fired at the same time. Dense silver light beams shot towards the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Each streak of silver light was a 10-meter-long star mithril crossbow arrow that contained the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. Bang! 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 Over 100 star crossbow arrows hit the silver light shield at the same time. There was an earth-shattering sound that reverberated through the 9 heavens. The sound shook the heavens and spread across a radius of 10,000 miles. The clear sky was also shattered, and countless pitch-black cracks appeared in the void. Violent and devastating shockwaves spread out in all directions, sweeping away all the white clouds in the sky for thousands of miles. The silver light shield shook violently. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains also trembled and made muffled rumbling sounds. The dazzling brilliance of the stars obscured the sky for thousands of miles, so dazzling that no one could open their eyes. Such an earth-shattering commotion caused the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to be dumbfounded. Their hearts were filled with anxiety. Fortunately, the silver light barrier was not broken. After a long time, the silver light that blotted out the sky gradually dissipated. The gigantic silver light barrier and the Pillar of Heaven's mountains also gradually stopped trembling. Everything returned to normal. Everyone looked up at the sky again and saw that Ji Tianxing had already flown out of the protective formation. He was flying high up in the sky, carrying an old man covered in blood in each hand. Everyone took a closer look and saw that they were 2 severely injured elders who had already fainted from the shock. Shwa! Ji Tianxing carried the 2 elders and flew back into the silver light barrier. Huanglong Daoist brought the other two severely injured elders and hurriedly greeted him. Ji Tianxing handed the two unconscious elders to Huanglong Daoist and instructed, "Send them to treat their injuries. Without my orders, no one is allowed to leave the protective formation." Huanglong Daoist hurriedly took the two elders and handed them to the guards behind him. He looked at Ji Tianxing worriedly and asked through voice transmission, "Master, who is that guy? Why don't they show up?" Ji Tianxing glanced at the battleship and said coldly, "They are foreign race experts from the depths of the starry sky. 2 months ago, they wandered into the North Underworld Mountain and seized a large territory. Now they have actually killed their way to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. If I'm not wrong, they are probably colluding with the demon race." Huanglong Daoist suddenly understood and cursed angrily. They are actually foreign races from other worlds? No wonder they don't dare to show up. Their methods are so strange. In fact, Ji Tianxing had seen countless foreign race experts, deities, and all kinds of strange battleships when he traveled across the galaxy. Only battleships were the most suitable magic treasures for traveling through the starry sky. Not to mention the black battleship in the sky, he had even seen a lot of real divine battleship. He was used to it. However, Huanglong Daoist had never left the world of 5 element. He could not imagine what the outside world was like. Ji Tianxing did not explain too much. He ordered Huanglong Daoist, "Huanglong, gather all the disciples and work together to operate the Sky Dome Array to protect the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I will personally meet those foreign races." After saying that, he took out the Sword of Burial of Heaven and flew into the sky in a flash to confront the black battleship. Huanglong Daoist was worried, but he did not dare to disobey the order. He hurriedly ordered all the elders, deacons, and disciples to gather at the training ground. A large number of guards and disciples received the order and immediately rushed to the training ground from all directions at the fastest speed. Everyone followed a special order and position and arranged themselves in a hexagram formation on the training ground. They worked together to release a vast amount of magic power and injected it into the Sky Dome Array. Suddenly, the silver light shield that enveloped the Pillar of Heaven's mountains became brighter and more powerful. Ji Tianxing stood in the sky and looked coldly at the black battleship. His left hand was behind his back and his right hand was holding the Sword of Burial of Heaven. His whole body was filled with battle intent and killing intent. The black battleship stopped attacking temporarily. At the front of the battleship, a black door opened. A non-humankind guard, who was wearing a black armor and had 3 dark golden patterns on his chest, walked out on his 4 hooves. He stood on the observation deck at the front of the battleship and looked at Ji Tianxing sharply. When he saw Ji Tianxing's face clearly, his face instantly changed, revealing a look of great astonishment. "You? Why are you here?" This person was shocked and could not help but exclaim. Moreover, he was speaking in a broken demon language. When Ji Tianxing saw this person clearly, he frowned and a murderous look flashed across his eyes. "The leader of the guards under and you? When did you learn the demon language?" In order to make the other party understand, Ji Tianxing also used the demon language. The leader of the guards then regained his senses and smiled coldly. He said slowly, "Looks like you are the leader of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the archenemy of the demon race, Ji Tianxing." Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "That's right, I am Ji Tianxing, the person you are looking for." The leader of the guards laughed even more and said in a mocking tone, "Previously in the starry sky, you were lucky to escape with your life. I did not expect to meet you here today. Maybe this is the will of the heavens. You are destined to die under my sword." Ji Tianxing looked at him indifferently and said in a disdainful tone, "You don't have the right to say that. Ask your master, and you, to come out." The leader of the guards frowned and said coldly, "Kid, you are really arrogant. However, you are just a small martial saint. I can easily kill you." Chapter 2245. The guard captain's words were ambiguous, and he did not reveal any information about an Yu. However, after Ji Tianqing heard this, he knew what was going on, and the corner of his mouth curled into a sneer. Hee, it seems that an Yu has underestimated me. He thinks that I am just an ordinary martial sage. He does not know that I am the one who fought with him in the illusionary spirit Star Corps. Therefore, he only sent his guard captain here. He knew clearly that with an Yu's status and arrogance, how could he not show up if he came here personally? How could he allow the guard captain to show off his strength here? He stared coldly at the guard captain and sneered, "Since an Yu is not here, all of you shall stay here. None of you shall go back alive." As soon as he finished speaking, his body shone with a dazzling golden light. His body expanded to 10 feet tall, and he looked like a god of war in golden armor. Heaven-breaking sword. He formed a sword sign with his left hand and held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand. He slashed out a giant star sword that was thousands of feet long. Suddenly, the dazzling starlight lit up the sky and turned everything within a few hundred miles white. The giant star sword slashed toward the guard captain with a force that could split the sky and earth. The guard captain had seen how powerful an Yu was. His face changed and he looked fearful. He pulled out his long saber and slashed out a dark red saber radiance toward the giant star sword. Kaboom! Amidst deafening noises, the dozens of dark red saber auras were cut apart by the star sword and exploded into thousands of pieces. The giant star sword's power was not reduced at all. It was still dazzling and it hit the black warship. Suddenly, the huge warship was pushed back more than 10 miles. It rolled a few times before it came to a stop. The star sword was shattered, but only a shallow dent was left on the pitch-black warship. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and muttered with a gloomy expression, "Damn it! This warship has surpassed the sacred class and reached the divine class? Is this an Yu's warship?" With his current strength, it was impossible for him to break a divine class magic weapon. At this moment, the guard captain flew over from 20 miles away and charged toward Su Mo furiously. "Ji Tianqing, give me your life." His voice was like muffled thunder as dark red flames surged in his eyes. He waved his long saber and slashed out 3 shocking saber lights. Ji Tianqing looked at him coldly. He swung the sword of burial of heaven again and slashed out a few more starry swords. 7-star sword! Bang 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 bang! The 700-meter-long stellar swords collided with the dark red saber light with a deafening boom. The saber light collapsed on the spot, scattering fiery fragments all over the sky. However, there were still 4 star swords left. They all struck the guard captain and sent him flying back. He tumbled for 20 miles before stabilizing himself and stopping in midair. Lowering his head, he saw a hideous wound on his chest, abdomen, and left front hoof. Blood kept flowing out of the wound. A piercing pain came, causing the captain's face to twist. His eyes were filled with shock. "In just over 2 months, your strength has actually increased by several times?" The guard captain growled in disbelief. He looked at Ji Tianqing as if he had seen a ghost. Ji Tianqing sneered and said, "Since you understand, why don't you come and accept your death?" As he spoke, he turned into a stream of light and rushed toward the guard captain, waving his sword again. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. He used the 9 swords of burial of heaven and slashed out hundreds of sword lights in one breath. He swore to kill the guard captain on the spot. The guard captain was tired of resisting. He waved his long saber crazily and slashed out saber lights all over the sky. However, he still couldn't stop the sword lights. With a series of muffled bangs, he was sent flying by the sword lights again. A few more hideous wounds appeared on his tall and sturdy body, and blood kept gushing out. After the 2 of them exchanged a few moves, he was forced to retreat more than 100 miles by Ji Tianqing. His left front hoof was also chopped off. His injuries were miserable, and he looked very miserable. Seeing this, the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains cheered excitedly and cheered for Ji Tianqing. The black battleship released the star crossbow again and attacked the mountain guarding formation. At the same time, 4 guards in black armor rushed out from the black door of the battleship and attacked Ji Tianqing. After the 4 guards joined the battle, the pressure on the guard captain was greatly reduced. He finally had a chance to catch his breath and quickly used the dark red light to heal his injuries. After he temporarily suppressed his injuries, he recovered his long saber and joined the battle. He joined forces with the 4 guards to attack Ji Tianqing. The 2 sides fought fiercely in the sky, constantly producing deafening explosions and dazzling light. The remaining 4 guards stayed in the battleship. They were in charge of controlling the array of the battleship. They took turns to release the star crossbow and the dark red light beam to attack the mountain guarding formation. On the dojo at the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the Huanglong Taoist and thousands of disciples poured their energy into the mountain guarding formation and tried their best to support it. Every time the star crossbow and the dark red light beam hit the mountain guarding formation, there would be an earth-shattering explosion. However, the power of the mountain guarding formation was endless. The silver light shield was constantly being repaired, and it was not broken. The 2 sides were in a stalemate. They wanted to see who could last until the end. Soon, 15 minutes passed. The battleship released more than 80 attacks, but it was still unable to break the mountain guarding formation. The Huanglong Taoist and thousands of disciples were exhausted. Their faces were pale and they were covered in cold sweat. However, they did not dare to relax. They all gritted their teeth and tried their best to hold on. On the other side, in the sky 300 miles away from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the fight between Ji Tianqing and the guards was finally coming to an end. In this 15 minutes, the 2 sides had exchanged more than 1,000 moves. 2 of the guards were seriously injured. Their limbs and heads had been chopped off and they were almost exhausted. They did not manage to dodge Ji Tianqing's unique swordsmanship. The scales on their chests were shattered by the sword of the burial of heaven, and they died on the spot. The other 2 outsider guards were also severely injured, just like their captain. Their hooves and arms were chopped off, and one of them had his head smashed into pieces. However, they were still alive. Their vitality was so strong that it made one's hair stand on end. Ji Tianqing knew that these people were very strange. The power they cultivated was very special. Their bodies were strong, but they did not have divine souls. Their fatal weakness was the dark red scales on their chest. The dark golden patterns on it probably represented their strength, realm, or status. The 2 sides exchanged a few more moves. Ji Tianqing slashed out sword radiance and forced the 3 of them to retreat. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he raised his left hand without hesitation and released a bright golden divine flame. God-slaying spear. Chapter 2246. Bang! There was a muffled explosion. The God-slaying spear pierced through the chest of the headless alien guard, and his body exploded on the spot. It was like a ball of dark red fire that bloomed in the sky. Thousands of sparks fell from the sky and then gradually dissipated. The strange thing was that the 30-meter-long dark golden divine spear did not dissipate. Under the control of Ji Tianqing, the dark golden spear changed its direction and pierced towards another black-armored guard. Swish! With a flash of golden light, the spear traveled thousands of feet in an instant. Its speed was faster than lightning. This black-armored guard was severely injured and weak. He did not have time to dodge or block the attack. Bang! Another muffled sound rang out. The dark golden divine spear pierced through his chest, shattering the dark red scale armor into pieces. Even his body exploded with a bang, turning into a rain of flesh and blood that rained down from the sky. Only then did the light of the dark golden spear dim and gradually dissipate. Ji Tianqing only used one secret skill to kill 2 black-armored guards. Such a scene caused the guard captain to be filled with shock. His eyes were filled with intense fear. The last bit of fighting spirit that remained in his heart also vanished into thin air. Swish! He turned around and ran without hesitation. Stimulated by the desire to live, he flew towards the black battleship at an astonishing speed. In the blink of an eye, he was like a beam of red light that crossed 80 miles in the sky and rushed to the black battleship. Caw. The black door at the front of the battleship opened. The captain of the guards could not wait to rush in. At this moment, a starry sword light flew from afar and struck the captain of the guards at the door like lightning. At this critical moment, the captain of the guards held the long saber with both hands and slashed at the starry sword light without caring about anything. Bang! With a loud bang, the starry sword broke into pieces and scattered starlight all over the sky. The captain of the guard's long saber was knocked away. He spat out blood and flew back. He crashed into the interior of the battleship and made muffled sound. With a loud clang, the black door finally closed. Ji Tianqing teleported from afar but was blocked outside the battleship. He frowned and raised the sword of burial of heaven with a grim expression. Then, he slashed down with all his might. God-slaying sword! The burial of heaven sword glowed with a mysterious black light and instantly expanded to several hundred feet long. It fiercely slashed out a 3,000 feet long dark golden sword. Clang! The giant sword carried the power to slay gods and exterminate demons as it struck the battleship with a loud bang that shook the heavens and the earth. In that instant, the sword of burial of heaven trembled incessantly and emitted waves of mournful cries. The dark golden sword shattered inch by inch into millions of fragments that blotted out the sky. The battleship descended from the sky as well, smashing violently against the foot of a mountain 100 miles away, then smashed into the ground along with a loud boom. The mountain peak 100 miles away collapsed on the spot, turning into ruins. The ground, which was covered with grass and forests, was also smashed into a crater with a radius of dozens of miles by the battleship. Dust and smoke rose into the air. Within 1,000 miles, the ground trembled violently. The mountains shook incessantly, and many ravines cracked open. It was as if a super-earthquake had erupted. The ground cracked and caved in one after another, producing loud, muffled rumbling sounds. Such terrifying power and momentum was like the wrath of a god. However, the black battleship was abnormally sturdy. Its defense was so powerful that it left one speechless. Only a palm-wide groove was left on the black metal surface of the battleship. It was 8,000 feet long and half a foot deep. Unfortunately, the black metal was not cut open. The captain of the guards and the 4 non-human guards hiding in the battleship were only dizzy from the impact. They did not suffer any substantial damage. After a while, the battleship flew out of the crater shakily, shaking off countless amounts of soil. Then, with a whoosh, it shot into the sky and fled toward the north. The battleship turned into a black streak of light. It was as fast as lightning and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Ji Tianqing hesitated for a while. He looked at the sword of burial of heaven in his hand. In the end, he did not chase after the battleship. He stood in the dust-filled sky, looking at the horizon in the north. His face was grim as he murmured, "It is a pity that the sword of burial of heaven has not recovered to the divine grade. It is still unable to fight against a divine-grade weapon. With my strength, I still cannot break the defense of a divine-grade weapon. When the sword of burial of heaven recovers to the divine grade, I will definitely cut and use battleship in half." As soon as he finished speaking, the voice of the sword of burial of heaven resounded in his mind. "Ouch! My old waist! This is so infuriating! Hurry up and think of a way to help me recover to the divine grade, as soon as possible. When that time comes, won't it be like chopping vegetables for me to deal with that broken battleship? We could have killed them, but we could only watch them escape. This is too depressing." Ji Tianqing lowered his head and looked at the sword of burial of heaven. He reached out and touched the cold blade. He said in a low voice, "Don't worry. It won't be long before you get what you want." With that, he waved his hand and shot the sword of burial of heaven out. It turned into a ray of light and flew back into the sword steel at the peak of the pillar of heaven's mountains. Only in the sword steel, with the help of the heavenly array, could the sword of burial of heaven recover quickly. After that, Ji Tianxing stepped into the air and returned to the peak of the pillar of heaven's mountains. He came to the center of the training hall and stood at the top of the sword steel. He looked down at the disciples in the training hall. The Huanglong Taoist, many elders, deacons, and disciples were all sweating profusely. They looked exhausted. However, everyone's face was filled with an expression as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. That battleship was terrifyingly powerful, but everyone worked together to support the array and block the attack of the battleship. Moreover, Ji Tianxing fought alone and killed 4 foreign race experts. He even repelled the battleship. This was a victory that lifted everyone's spirits and filled them with pride. Ji Tianxing's gaze swept across the entire training hall. He said in a dignified and loud voice, "In the past 1,000 years, our sect has been invaded and attacked by countless forces. It's a pity that our sect could not unite and fight against the enemies together. Therefore, our sect's strength has been damaged and weakened over and over again. But today, everyone's performance is very good. I am very gratified and very satisfied. Whether it is now or in the future, I hope that the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains can unite and fight against the enemies together. Only in this way can we stand at the peak of martial arts and continue to be glorious forever." The thunderous sound waves rolled across the training hall, shaking everyone's heart and soul. Everyone present couldn't help but raise their heads and puff out their chests, revealing a face full of pride and determination. Everyone's blood was boiling and they were excited. They all looked at Ji Tianxing in awe. At this moment, almost all of the disciples could deeply feel what the honor of the sect was, and what the belief of martial arts was. After that, Ji Tianxing ordered the disciples to go back and rest. The Huanglong Taoist, elders, and deacons also had to treat the injured and deal with the aftermath. Ji Tianxing stayed behind and personally inspected the heavenly dome array. He repaired and improved the damaged areas. He had made up his mind to connect the Star Divine Furnace and the heavenly dome array. This would increase the power of the heavenly dome array by 3 times. This was because he had a premonition that today's incident was just the beginning. Chapter 2247. A day later, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains regained its peace. None of the disciples were injured, but they had used up too much of their magic power, so they were all cultivating. The broken ground on the mountain peak, many of the houses and palaces that had fallen were also repaired by the craftsmen. Only the 4 elders who were seriously injured would have to go into seclusion to recuperate for a few more months. Other than that, everything was back to normal and orderly. Ji Tianxing and Huanglong Taoist started to get busy. The 2 of them had to work together to set up a few sacred grade arrays. 2 of the sacred arrays were to strengthen the defense, while the other 2 were to support the heavenly array. This was a huge and tedious project that would take at least 10 days to complete. Furthermore, it would consume a huge amount of spiritual stones and resources. Luckily, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was getting more and more prosperous. There was some surplus in the treasury, enough for Ji Tianxing to set up a few arrays. 10 days later, the 4 sacred arrays were set up. Ji Tianxing spent another day to connect the Star Divine Furnace and the heavenly array. In this way, the Heavenly Dipper and Earthly Terminus arrays formed by the 108 mountain peaks within the Pillar of Heaven's mountains continuously supplied energy to the Star Divine Furnace, and the Star Divine Furnace also supplied energy to the heavenly array, so that the heavenly array would never run out of energy. Unless someone could destroy the Heavenly Dipper and Earthly Terminus arrays, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and become an indestructible fortress. Even if the martial god came personally, he might not be able to break through the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. After dealing with the defensive array, Ji Tianqing entered the Star Divine Furnace again. After the warship bombarded the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, he felt that the situation was critical and the pressure was increasing. He only wanted to smelt the illusionary spirit star core as soon as possible, and then use the ninth heaven cauldron in the divine weapon pavilion to help the sword of burial of heaven become a divine weapon. Only when the sword of burial of heaven becomes a divine weapon would he be qualified to fight against an Yu and the ancestral demon god. What made him feel gratified was that Qian Yu and the Black Dragon did not slack off. They had both mastered the technique that he gave them and were concentrating on smelting the illusionary spirit star core. After more than a month of smelting, the illusionary spirit star core was obviously smaller, and it was only 180 miles long. The surface of the originally pitch-black stellar core also lit up with a silver light, and it was recovering its luster. Ji Tianqing encouraged Qian Yu and the Black Dragon. Then, he personally cast a secret technique to refine the star core. Even though he estimated that he would only need 3 years to successfully smelt the star core, he still couldn't do anything about it. However, he couldn't wait any longer. 3 years was still too long. If there was a miracle, he really hoped that the star core would be successfully smelted tomorrow. In the southern part of Dark North Mountain, in the 100-origin city of the Jingshan region, in the majestic and dignified city lord's mansion, and Yu's study. He was standing by the window, looking out with a gloomy expression. In the study, the black-armored guard captain stood respectfully, not daring to even breathe loudly. The guard captain's left front leg and right rear leg had been chopped off, leaving only 2 legs on the ground. It looked particularly comical. Previously, when he had fled back to 100-origin city, his injuries had been even worse, and he was in an extremely sorry state. After 10 days of recuperation, his injuries had stabilized, and he had recovered 60% of his strength. After a long silence, Yu spoke in the strange tribe's language and muttered to himself in a low voice, "I never thought that the leader of the Pillar of Heaven's mountain, Ji Tianqing, who killed millions of demon tribesmen, would be that guy. In just 2 months, his strength has increased by several times. It is a miracle. No wonder Ling Xian asked me to kill Ji Tianqing before agreeing to cooperate. That guy is indeed extraordinary. He is only a martial sage, but he is invincible among the martial sages. I only hate that I didn't take him seriously back then and actually let him escape with his life. If I had killed him on the spot at the illusory spirit star core, none of this would have happened." The guard captain hurriedly lowered his head and said with a voice full of self-blame, "My lord, I underestimated the enemy and caused the failure of the mission. I even lost 4 guards. Fortunately, I steered your Wolf Fong battleship and managed to escape alive. Now that we know Ji Tianqing's background, we will definitely not fail the next time we take action." And Yu shook his head and revealed a cold smile. He said in a low voice, "No, since we have already failed once, we cannot rashly attack a second time. Ling Xian is despicable and wants to use us to help him eliminate a strong enemy. He wants to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Not only can he get rid of Ji Tianqing, but he can also weaken our strength." The guard captain understood what Yu meant and nodded. "That's right. We are short on manpower and we only have 80 guards. We cannot sacrifice them so easily. Every death of a guard is a great loss to us. My lord, what do you plan to do next? Are we just going to ignore the Pillar of Heaven's mountain?" And Yu shook his head again and said in a low voice, "Of course not. I want the 72 cities and the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. Especially the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. I have been flipping through the history of the Shenwu continent recently, and I discovered something very interesting. The founder of the Pillar of Heaven's mountain was the strongest person on the continent more than 1,000 years ago, and he was known as Kenshin. Furthermore, this world has been sealed by the gods, and no one has been able to ascend for tens of thousands of years. Only Kenshin managed to ascend to the god realm. But for some reason, Kenshin fell 1,000 years ago. Ji Tianqing, who now controls the Pillar of Heaven's mountain, is rumored to be Kenshin's reincarnation, which is why he is so monstrous. The guard captain frowned, and his expression became very strange. This world has been sealed by the gods? No wonder there is a golden barrier on the surface of the planet that prevents us from entering. But why is this world sealed? Ascending to the God realm is extremely tempting to the people of this world. But to us, this is not attractive at all. And you revealed a meaningful smile and said in a playful tone, "That's right. To the heaven crushers, the universe is like the ocean, and we are the hunters who fight against the wind and waves. As long as one's strength surpasses the void God realm, one can successfully ascend to the God realm. But to the people of this world, no matter how strong they are, they will never be able to ascend. Think about it, if I could show them a path and give them a chance to ascend to the God realm, they would be grateful to me. Tell me, do you think they would be so grateful that they would be willing to serve me?" Hearing this, the guard captain had a sudden realization, and his eyes shone brightly. "That's right. Sir, you are too brilliant. The powerhouses of this world have not been able to ascend for tens of thousands of years, and they do not know the situation of the God realm. They have an incomparable desire to ascend. If you can make use of this, you will be able to achieve great things." He. And you laughed coldly and said in a playful tone, "This world is very special, and it is much more interesting than the other worlds that we have conquered. I have decided to completely occupy this world and plunder all of its resources so that I can study its mysteries." He paused for a moment, and his tone became awe-inspiring as he continued, "However, this plan needs to be carried out gradually, and it cannot be rushed." Chapter 2248. 2 hours later. And you boarded the Wolf Fong battleship with 8 black-armored guards. Whoosh! The giant battleship flew out of the governor's manor and headed north at lightning speed. On the way to Biming Palace, 4 guards were in charge of steering the ship. And you sat in a cold, austere room made of black iron. He held 2 ancient books in his hands and quietly flipped through them. The ancient book in his right hand was a brief history of Shenwu continent written in the demon language. As for the ancient book in his left hand, it was an extremely common book written in the demon language. Only the children of the demon race would learn this book when they first learned how to read. And you had wandered the universe for many years, conquering and plundering many large worlds along the way. He had accumulated a wealth of experience. Conquering and plundering a world was not enough to rely on brute force alone. He still needed to study and research this world's history and foundation. In the 3 months since he had entered the 5-elemental world, aside from conquering, killing, and conquering territories, he had spent all his time studying and researching Shenwu continent. His starting point was to learn the demon language and writing. With his experience, strength, and intelligence, he had already grasped the basics of the demon language and had a rough understanding of Shenwu continent. This was why the Heaven Punishers were so terrifying. Not only did they have an extremely strong life force and combat power, but they also had a learning ability that other races could not hope to achieve. Half a day later, the Wolf Fong battleship flew across a wasteland and arrived at the peak of the Divine Mountain. The battleship stopped above Biming Palace and floated motionlessly in the air. The captain of the guards walked into the room and respectfully reported to Yu, "Sir, we have arrived." And Yu nodded and stored the 2 ancient books in his spatial ring. He stood up and straightened his dark red cloak. His hand was on the hilt of his sword as he stepped out of the battleship. When he landed in the plaza outside Biming Palace with his 2 guards, Ling Xian and the other demon generals were already waiting for him. Ling Xian hurriedly greeted him and cupped his fists with a smile. "Sir Yu, we had a face-to-face discussion not long ago. What is it that you have to personally come here today?" And Yu's face was tense, and his expression and gaze were sinister. He coldly replied, "What? You don't seem to welcome me?" Or are you feeling guilty? Ling Xian's heart skipped a beat. He naturally understood that An Yu was referring to something else. However, his expression did not change. He maintained his smile and pretended to be puzzled. Lord An Yu seems to be in a bad mood? So be it. As a sincere ally, I certainly have to give my ally comfort and care at this time. Lord An Yu, please enter the main hall for a chat. Ling Xian pretended that he didn't know what was going on. He put on a smile and didn't seem to be angry at all. Instead, it made An Yu feel even more disgusted and even more wary of him. In just a few encounters, An Yu understood that Ling Xian's thoughts were vicious, and his actions were treacherous and despicable. He stood out among the demon race experts. No wonder the ancestral devil god gave him the authority. An Yu suppressed his anger for the time being and followed Ling Xian into the meeting hall. After both of them were seated, An Yu was too lazy to talk nonsense with Ling Xian. He went straight to the point. I was full of sincerity when I cooperated with you, but you schemed against me and deliberately concealed information about Tianzhu Mountain and Ji Tianxing. Ling Xian, you don't have to put on an act with me. I have already seen through your thoughts. Ji Tianxing seems to be the reincarnation of Kenshin. He is now the strongest person below the martial god realm. Other than a god realm expert, no one can kill him. Since An Yu had exposed the truth and talked about the important matter without hiding anything, Ling Xian could no longer be vague. He kept his smile and said solemnly, Lord An Yu, I didn't mean to conceal anything. Moreover, the information that I gave you was absolutely true. Ji Tianxing is indeed only a martial sage. He is also the enemy of my tribe. You sent a few guards to attack Tianzhu Mountain in a battleship. In the end, they failed miserably. I have also heard the news. As for the deaths of the few guards, I am deeply sorry and regretful. However, you can only blame yourself for underestimating your enemy and not attacking personally. It has nothing to do with my tribe. If you had attacked Tianzhu Mountain personally, Ji Tianxing would have been executed by now, and we could have immediately started working together to conquer the world. He. And you sneered and said in a mocking tone, What? Now that you've failed the mission, you're trying to push all the blame onto this seat? Since that is the case, we have nothing to talk about. I don't want to think about the 72 cities and Tianzhu Mountain for now. I think North Sea Mountain is not bad. Especially this holy mountain and North Sea Palace. I like them very much. Hearing this, Ling Xian's face changed. He frowned and said, Lord An Yu, you can't joke about this. You should know that my tribe is sincere. Seeing An Yu's cold smile, Ling Xian gritted his teeth and said, All right, I won't talk nonsense. Lord An Yu, what do you want in return? Only then did An Yu put away his sneer and said in a serious tone, I can kill Ji Tianxing myself, but you will have to pay 3 times the price. I will not give up the 5 regions in the south. The 72 cities and Tianzhu Mountain will still belong to Maine. Also, you must gather 1,000,000 demon warriors for me. I want the best of them. Ling Xian furrowed his brows and shouted without hesitation, Impossible! Lord An Yu, you are asking for too much. You are too overbearing. This is just a small lesson for you. And you sneered and said, I am sincere about cooperating with you, but you are playing tricks. You can't blame anyone. Ling Xian shook his head again and said firmly, Lord An Yu, you are forcing me. Please forgive me for not agreeing. And you did not back down and said, This only shows that you are not sincere at all. The two of them were in a stalemate, neither of them willing to back down. The negotiation was in a stalemate. The atmosphere in the hall was almost frozen. However, at this moment, a voice transmission suddenly sounded in Ling Xian's mind. Master, that bitch has shown herself. It was a low and hoarse voice. It was cold and full of murderous intent. Ling Xian knew that this was his most trusted and most hidden trump card, Song Ying. His body shook, and then the corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. He sent a voice transmission to Tsang Ing and ordered, "Take her down. I want to see what she's up to." After that, he stood up and saluted in Yu. With a solemn expression, he said, "Master and you, please be patient and wait here for a moment.